All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody out there. Welcome to CDK Day Track 2. This is going to be our second track for CDK Day, and welcome. Glad everyone could be here. We had over 4,000 people sign up, so super excited about that. Quick coverage and introduction into everything. We do have some sign language interpreters here today. Jonathan is joining us. We've also got Hillary, who's going to be helping us through a lot of this. We've also got a couple of co-hosts to helping me out today. We've got Satya and Mirabella, who are going to be joining us and helping me throughout all of this. A little bit of housekeeping real quick to get started. We do have a CDK Dev Slack server. If you have not already joined, go ahead and join us over. You can find the link on cdk.dev. We've got channels set up for both track 1 and track 2. If you want to discuss any of the topics that you see today during the presentations, just head over to track 2. Any questions that you have regarding the presentations, ask them over there. We're also going to have a Q&A after the second presentation this morning. So if you have any questions in general for the CDK dev team or anything in general, please ask them over in the Slack channel. We do have a code of conduct. You can see it over at cdkday.com/coc. Please read and review it. Long and short of it is just don't be rude to people. If for some reason, though, you happen to see anybody violating that, go ahead and report it over by sending an email to report@cdk.dev, and we will get that all addressed as soon as we can. So to start us all off this morning, we've got our wonderful gentleman named Ansgar. He's going to be chatting with us today about extending CDK constructs and Terraform. So Ansgar, why don't you go ahead and kick this all off for us? You're on mute. There we go.
Yeah, I didn't start it. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I'm going to show you how you can extend CDK for Terraform constructs. So yeah, that's what this will be about. First, something about shortly, my name is Ansgar, and I worked with Terraform in the past for a few projects. And I was always inspired by all those different kind of providers and modules that kind of inspired me with all the things I could build with those building blocks. And so I couldn't wait to start working on the CDK for Terraform and finally joined the team this month. So yeah, I'm happy I'm here. And yeah, just maybe some of you don't know the CDK for Terraform yet. So just some short overview. The CDK for Terraform allows you to define your infrastructure in high-level languages. It uses the JSII library by AWS for that, the same that is also powering the AWS CDK. And this enables the support for the different languages. Currently, those are TypeScript, JavaScript, Java, Python, and C#. And in the future, there will others follow. So Golang is something we have in mind for that already. And JSII currently supports it. So that brings it kind of to the table, or started to support it. And yeah, regarding the CDK for Terraform, how does it work? So under the hood, it uses Terraform and it synthesizes the programming constructs to some JSON format that is used by the Terraform binary itself. And this allows us to reuse all existing Terraform modules and providers. And this is uniquely cool about the CDK-TF because we can even keep those side by side. So we can keep using HCL and combine this with some constructs from the CDK for Terraform for maybe new features or other teams that like to use that. And so, for example, an ops team could provide standard modules that are picked up by application teams, and they could consume it in their favorite language. So just a short example how that would look like. On the left, you can see HCL, and on the right, you can see the TypeScript, or this time TypeScript, as I'm going to cover in my talk as well, the TypeScript representation of the same thing, kind of. And once more, thanks to JSI for making this possible. And yeah, now we have some high-level language like TypeScript, and we could start to explore how we could extend these constructs. So maybe let's first have a look at what could our goals be. So why should we extend the constructs at all? As we now have the power of a high-level programming language, we can do things that you normally do in such languages. So for example, hide implementation details and rather show the intent and some abstraction layer. So to move the verbosity of some things you do to a separate file, and by that accidentally build reusable building blocks, and in the end to just keep things dry. So in this demo, I'm going to show we are going to use this for granting access to something which normally needs quite some boilerplate. And I was inspired by this for this by the AWS CDK. So let's have a short look over there how layer 2 constructs are built or look like with AWS CDK. So this is an example I took from their docs. So they're creating a Lambda function and an S3 bucket, and then calling a grant read-write method on the bucket, which grants access to the Lambda to access that. So with AWS, to configure such a thing, you usually would create your IAM rules manually. And yeah, by that, if you do that a lot, you probably have a vertically mounted monitor to be able to read all those files at once and understand them. But this feature of the AWS CDK makes it really great to just understand what should happen and keep the exact implementation out of sight. So what we are going to use this way of syntax for is the concept of granting access. So we are using the Terraform CDK, and we are going to grant access across different resources of even different providers. For this demo, I'm going to use the AWS provider and DigitalOcean. So just a short preview of what the implementation is going to look like as we're going to go into the code soon. There will be some kind of grantor higher order function that wraps our existing resource, and how that exactly works is something I'm going to show you soon. But this enables or adds this grant access method that you can see at the bottom on the last line that can define such a behavior between those elements. So we're having a database and a droplet, which is the server at DigitalOcean, and we're going to do a grant access on that so that the droplet is allowed to access that database. So I don't want to spend any more time on those theoretical ways, so I'm just going to go into the code. So let's jump over, and I'm going to start off with just showing you the basic structure of the CDK for Terraform project, as some of you might not have seen that yet. So everything starts with a CDK-TF.json file. This is our entry point, for this project. We're using TypeScript, so that's defined as the language and line 2. And I defined or mentioned some Terraform providers and modules that are going to be used by the stack I'm using and the infrastructure I'm building. So I have them mentioned over there. And yeah, so that's just some starting point. And defining those providers and modules over here allows us to generate the bindings for the native Terraform providers to be used in this case with TypeScript. So let us have a look at the main TS, so the real entry point. This is the file that's used when we're synthesizing, which means when we are using our programming constructs in TypeScript and boiling them down or converting or synthesizing them to some JSON that is used by Terraform in the end. So some JSON representation of Terraform. So yeah, So we are defining 4 different stacks. They are imported from different files. I'm going to go through them later. And using multiple stacks at once is a new feature we got from the latest 0.3 release. And yeah, so just configuring some remote config to have our Terraform state on Terraform Cloud, and just some different workspaces over there, and the synthesize command, which creates our JSON. So let's jump into a first example of infrastructure. So over here, I already spoiled it by having scrolled down. We are having the first stack, and this one is the named DigitalOcean stack. And at the top, we can see our database cluster resource that we are going to use is wrapped in some kind of method that we already saw on the slides. And yeah, this is similar to what you would do in Terraform. So it creates a provider, a new database cluster, and a new droplet. And the thing that is new is finally in line 32, our grant access method that we wanted to have so badly and to just get rid of some boilerplate. So we have that there. How that works, something I'm going to show you soon. Let's jump into that. So the grant access, I put those things just besides the project for now, so that's not a readily available library or something. So grant access, it's all defined in this TypeScript file, is powered by having wrapped our resource in this grantor high order function which returns a new class that implements this new thing and keeps everything else from the base. So from our DigitalOcean database cluster resource, for example, it uses a concept of having some kind of strategy that's used to do the granting. And over here is just some code to look for a default strategy for the given resource types, or else throwing an error. And if you don't want to have it look for one, you can also explicitly pass a strategy. And a strategy just has the interface of grant access. So it just implements the granting part. And for our example, I have some default strategies in place that I put over here. Some kind of registry at the top I won't go into, that just takes care of the registering of those, and yeah, and finding a strategy if we need one based on the types. And this is the first one that we just saw that is working with our example, that I just called it DigitalOcean DB grant strategy. And this grant strategy takes a database cluster and a droplet. So the grantor, wherever the access gets granted on, in this case is of the type database cluster, and the grantee is the droplet, so our server. And it just creates a new resource. And so the new database firewall resource that is specific to working with that on DigitalOcean. And that resource would normally have been defined besides those other resources. So this is the implementation detail that we kind of abstracted away, that is automatically picked if we are trying to grant access between those two types of resources. So it just takes the grantor's ID for the cluster ID and adds a rule of the type droplet, with the ID of the droplet. So that is the thing that is used in the end if we are being over here and doing a grant access on the droplet. So just hide that away. If you read that file, you know what happens. So let's test this. And this is why I'm having those outputs over here, even outputting the password, because I'm going to use them to create an SSH tunnel to the instance and try to connect to the database just to see where that works. So I'm going to do that now in a way that I can just run this single test for the DigitalOcean one. So I'm using Jest over here. So my usual go-to tool for testing TypeScript projects would be Jest. So I picked that and I ran the test and it works. So just to prove you that the test not just says return true or whatever, we're going to have a short look at that as well. And so I can show you how that works. It's a bit weird because opening an SSH tunnel via TypeScript is something you don't normally do. So yeah, this test case gets the output. So it has to know about the database, about the IP of the server, about the droplet, and then can open an SSH tunnel to the instance and tunneling the database connection to my local system as it runs, waits a bit. And for the test case itself, so that was part of the setup, it's going to execute the Docker run command because I didn't want to install the Postgres CLI on my machine and make sure that the versions are correct. So I'm just going to use that one from the Docker image. I'm putting the database URL in there that I have that points to localhost. And I'm replacing localhost with host.docker.internal so that inside the Docker machine, my test can phone out to what's running on my Mac. So on my Mac, where the port is exposed, which connects to the database somewhere else in some data center. So, and there's a command being run, \l. So that's the list databases command for Postgres, which returns some kind of result that I'm checking for the test now. So those who worked with Jest before knows that they are built in tools to match certain kind of outputs. And one thing is to match an inline snapshot that gets automatically put in there the first time this test runs. And for my example, this is what was in there before. It was not written with my run that I just showed you. So when the test ran a few minutes ago, the database actually still returned those databases, databases and the cluster returned them. So that's a simple kind of test to check whether it actually worked. And maybe it's not that good to use that in production. If someone would add a database and my test would fail and I think my infrastructure is not working anymore, but it's the first starting point. And it just shows what you can do with the power of higher level languages. So let me go back a step. So this was the first example using DigitalOcean, a droplet, and a database cluster. But I promised you I would also mix and match those providers and put the AWS one in there as well. So this brings me to a second stack I have in place, which uses an EC2 instance, so a server over at AWS, and grants access to that server, or grants this server access to the database at DigitalOcean. While this would not make much sense for production use case, even if it were across regions, that would be even worse. It's just a simple example to show how that works. So I'm having the database cluster over here as before, and I'm having set up for the EC2 instance. So I'm getting an AMI for the latest Ubuntu, and I'm going to create a key pair with my public key that I created for this demo for the SSH tunnel. And I'm going to add a security group that allows me or anyone to connect to that SSH port. And then I'm going to create the EC2 instance, and pass that AMI ID, the key name of my key, and the security group's name. So, and last but not least, the joyful part, I'm going to grant access to the database. But the last time I showed you the strategies, it had a strategy for DigitalOcean Droplet, So this time around, something else has to happen. So if we have a look a bit further down in my file, there is a DigitalOcean DB EC2 grant strategy, which takes an instance. And this instance is the construct that's generated for an EC2 instance via the Terraform provider. So this time it looks similar. So I'm going to add a database firewall. And so just another new resource. And the database cluster is still the one giving the ID for the rule for itself. And the rule this time doesn't have the droplet, as we can see here at the top, but rather the public IP of the EC2 instance that it tags. So we can make use of TypeScript over here, even when writing those rules. So I could also go on the AMI, which does not make sense, but I can get some code completion over here, which is quite joyful when you work with that and build those things with the types and so on. And this time I also have a test in place to just show that it also works. This time with EC2. I won't show you the test case as it's very similar. And it also can connect across clouds, kind of. But that's not all. So I'm going to show you another example, and this time I will switch it around. So I'm going to, connect a DigitalOcean droplet to an RDS instance over at AWS. So the example you saw previously was DigitalOcean database and an EC2 instance at AWS. This time I'm going to switch the database to AWS and keep the droplet for DigitalOcean. So this time I have some other resources in place to set up the database at AWS. And as I didn't want to have it in my default VPC, I added a VPC module to create a new VPC. So I'm using the Terraform AWS modules VPC AWS module. The name is quite interesting because it's generated, but that one is coming from, just jump over to the CDK-Dia.json, the Terraform modules part of it, which features this VPC AWS module. And I'm going to just Terraform or CDK-TF get is the command which generates all of those things. And that also generated this for me. And I added some config to that. So, and it took me quite a bit of time, to be honest. So I did have to find out how exactly I could make my database publicly accessible to the world. And I think it's a good thing that it was that hard. So I'm going to, I need to enable DNS host names and DNS support and web cluster of that VPC. Some more resources. I got password and a security group and a Terraform AWS modules RDS AWS. So the RDS database, the managed Postgres, the instance for that. So this module also creates some other resources for me that I need with that, or that are best practices to be used with an RDS instance. Not so best practice are my names and usernames, but never mind. So I'm going to go a bit further down, and now we see a new thing. Those of you who were giving me the right attention with the grant access method know that there was the option to pass a strategy explicitly. And this is what I'm doing over here. And I'm being very explicit even in the naming of it. So I'm adding a new droplet to RDS via security groups grant strategy. So also almost a bit of storytelling over here. So for the RDS instance, I have a security group that manages the rules, what can access it. And as I can pass multiple security groups to the instance, I wouldn't just want to pick the first one from the RDS module, because that could also be used for other infrastructure, and I would accidentally expose that infrastructure to my droplet as well. So that's something I want to be careful of. So I'm going to explicitly pass the security group in there that I'm going to use for this access, so it gets opened up, kind of. So let's have a look at the grant access. And because it's just used here, I just put it at the bottom so we can have a quick look. So if you call grant access, it adds a new security group rule to that security group that was parsed, and it takes the grantee, so the DigitalOcean droplets IP address, and puts it into this argument or setting so that the access is scoped down to that IP. And because I also added this check prerequisites on grantor, so on the RDS instance, which has some assertion about it being publicly accessible, some flag I had to set. I didn't at first, and I wondered why I couldn't get the access to work. So I just added this as a short check. So if I would add this publicly accessible or set it to false, it would, tell me when I try to synthesize it. So it would fail in that case and tell me that I need to turn that on, because otherwise it wouldn't work. But I wanted to give that access. So as we are now using some generics over here for this security group, TypeScript knows that I am supposed to grant access to a droplet. So if I now switch this out and would say maybe database grant access to my password, which does not make sense, but it could to someone maybe, it would tell me with a weird TypeScript error, but at the bottom it boils down to you pass me a password type of resource, but I need to work with a droplet. So there I can also, on the syntax level or on the compile step, if you wish to, already see if something doesn't seem right, and I can still put my droplet in here and everything is fine. So I'm not going to run the test for this one, but as I just showed the type on test, it will run all three at once, and this one included. So for the RDS instance as well, it's that test case doesn't differ a lot from the other two. So just the AWS RDS instance happens to have another host name than the droplet database, and some other default databases that are in there. So RDS admin, something you know from your AWS RDS instance, that is not present on your DigitalOcean database, but that's expected. So they ran, they worked, and that's about it for the demo part. As always, I'm going to put that code online, and it already is. So if you dig around, you will find it even before I send the link. And yeah, that would bring me back to my talk. So that was the code, and let us have a short recap about what we just saw. So this example is a bit different than what I used to jump into the code before. So this features the explicit granting with supplying the strategy. So this time, you just saw it and I just explained it. This time we can see some security group, DB, and droplet, and explicitly passing that security group in there. And so that's something I figured out would be useful, and to make that explicit, to not have side effects that could kind of fail. And let's take a look at the broader picture here. So what can we do now? So we have endless possibilities with the high order languages, so we could do almost anything. And what we just did is we built an abstraction for combining some resources, this time for granting access. And another thing we can do, or we did actually, is to use generics in TypeScript to catch invalid configuration very early on, so you know what happens. And if you have good code completion in your IDE, you can also make use of that, because it's going to, basically help you in writing the infrastructure. And by telling you what you can put in there and suggesting it to you. And another thing we just learned is we can use all the existing Terraform modules and providers. That those numbers are probably outdated already. They are lots, and to me, they're always very inspiring to just scroll through and see, oh, wow, I could configure GitHub and that one and so on. So that's always interesting to mix and match. And the modules that are available on the registry also implement a lot of best practices already. So we can make use of that and don't have to reinvent the wheel for that. And we can do the same for our own modules. So if we have some teams working on HCL for Terraform, or if you have, for example, a stack using TerraGrunt, so that's very deep into the Terraform sphere, but you could also use those existing modules and combine them in higher order languages or high level languages that can be used by, for example, maybe more the application teams that are more that feel more at home with their existing tool sets and for testing that. So, but what's next? So this is a prototype. This was the first draft of how layer 2 abstractions could look like for the CDK for Terraform. And it explored the concept of a grant abstraction. So what we want to do in the future is to ship a set of usable experiments similar to this one for a small set of use cases. So granting access could be one of them, and others are something we have to still figure out. And of course, we want to make this available in more languages via JSII, the library built by AWS that powers all those different languages and that you can use with all the CDKs available. And JSII currently does not support generics, but there are ways to kind of make that still available in your favorite language. And we have to see a way or figure out how we could work with that. And of course, we need to do a lot more experimentation. So this is just a single use case I came up with. And we want to look for some that are across different resource types. So if you have a PagerDuty provider, for example, or stuff like that. So maybe, and we need to figure out what syntax is idiomatic to other languages. So this was TypeScript, and the names already looked a bit like Java, so very long and kind of descriptive actually, so maybe not that Java. But someone writing Python would probably disapprove of those names. So we have to find a way that would feel idiomatic to TypeScript users. And so if you're interested in that, hit us with whatever, and I've got some links for you to get started. So for the CDK for Terraform, we are having CDK.TF, which points you to our GitHub repo. Easy starting point to get into. I published this code and the slides you're currently seeing on my GitHub with Talk CDK Day 2021 in that repo. There's learn.hashicorp.com with tutorials and how to get started with the CDK for Terraform. And there's the Discuss forum for CDK for Terraform, where you could ask questions or give feedback, and you can also write us directly if you stumble upon us somewhere on the internet. If you have feedback on that, or some ways how this works, or some ways this could work, and we want to build some kind of iterative loop to gear towards a way of how those layer 2 abstractions could work and also should work across providers and modules, so that we can have some general abstractions that would also make sense for lots of other providers. And basically tell us more about the use cases if you have any, maybe some popped into your heads, and write me on Twitter. My link is, I think, in my name. And yeah, with that, I just want to say thank you. And yeah, I think we could go over to some questions if there are. I think some of the hosts, yeah.
Thank you, Ansgar. Thank you very much. That was very, very thorough. We do have one question actually that's come in from Admir Trakic, and that is, what does test really do? Creates an infra, or how does it work? And greetings from Denmark.
Greetings to Denmark. I did not quite get the question regarding which tool does and create.
So the question
Ansgar,
is,
you had your test, you had the jest test which were running. So
yeah, the jest.
Yeah, so Admir wants to know if does it actually bring up the infrastructure, or is it a mock?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I didn't show that. I deployed the infrastructure with the CDK for Terraform beforehand, and the jest that was running was just testing the existing infrastructure. So with the CDK for Terraform, I have this command CDK for Terraform deploy, or for example, diff for my spec DO, which is DigitalOcean. And yeah, I kind of flanked that one. So that is the deploying part that I didn't show because I didn't want to bore you with waiting for the database to become available, as this can take quite a bit of time. So I added this infrastructure beforehand. So here's my DigitalOcean account where you can see the database clusters that I provisioned already. And yeah, if I now do a plan, it just tells me nothing is going to be changed because it's already there correctly. But it's a great question, and glad that you asked because I should have made that clearer that existed already. Jest just did some testing, so that had nothing to do with the CDK for Terraform to that extent. You could also just use an empty project, put Jest in there, and yeah, instruct it to open a SSH tunnel and connect somewhere else, and yeah, do that way kind of. I can't ask whether that answered the question, but I hope it does. And if it didn't, just reach out to me.
Ansgar, thank you. I learned quite a lot of new techniques, especially one thing which really caught my eye. Emojis for comments. I don't think I've seen that anywhere, and I'm seeing it now. I'm like, I cannot go back to regular old text comments. It just brings up a whole new series of expressions.
Yeah, there's some languages that support them. I think Swift does, but I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, I just wonder how many more code bases will break just because of the emojis. It's fascinating to see people put emojis in Wi-Fi SSIDs to see how many routers would break. We have one more question. It says, is it possible to migrate an existing workspace created with HCL to the CDK?
Yeah, so currently this project is still in quite an early stage. So there's no professional support or something to that extent. But as we're just using Terraform under the hood, and we're also working with Terraform states. So the thing one would have to do for that is you would have to point your Terraform or your CDK constructs and your state to the existing state. And then you would get quite some diff probably, and you would need to maybe configure a TypeScript code to reflect what is actually there in the infrastructure currently. And I can also show you the CDK-TF output. So if I just open the DigitalOcean one, we see this JSON. This is the same content that you have with HCL, and just not so readable. And yeah, so this is what Terraform takes. And there are some experimental tools I think someone built that we talked yesterday in the Terraform community office hours that can convert from HCL to CDK-TF constructs, but something to that extent would also kind of work. But yeah, you can keep your state. So it can work with the same state depending on the complexity, but it is possible.
Oh, thanks, Ansgar. I hope that answers your question, KL. On a slightly related note, did you learn about any gotchas or any such things that we need to take care of, or anything which stood out more than anything, when you were building this, when you were extending the constructs?
Not particularly. So the code, so I was rather surprised that it was so easy to because I was just using TypeScript. I'm adding a new method. I was digging around the TypeScript docs. So if I were to be a Python developer working with the CDK-TF with Python, and I want to build a similar thing, I would be picking around with the Python language and how to extend or monkey patch or whatever things over there. So I was just astonished by how easy that was, and it was no magic at all. So it maybe looks like it, but it's just code. So that was the main takeaway for me.
Awesome. I hope that inspires a lot more people to experiment with. I'll be honest, I've never tried yet CDK for Terraform. And yeah, I really love Terraform. I really love CDK. It just seems a little incomprehensible to sort of mix and match these two. But when I see what you've done, it's like, yeah, I'm going to try out something funky there.
Yeah.
Danielle mentioned the other approach that you can take is wrap the existing HCL as a module in terms of creating it with a CDK. Yep.
Yeah. Was that a question or was it?
Oh, it was just a small comment.
Yeah.
Just wanted to speak it out for a benefit of all.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the great things this enables us to do, because we can just use an existing module, even a private one that we as a company might have, and generate those constructs for it. So that's something the CDK-TF can do for any module, and then work with those constructs in our favorite languages. So you could have an ops team, I think I mentioned that earlier, that builds such modules for the specific infrastructure a company might have. And then you could have application teams that are fond of all their higher level languages they love to work with and all the surrounding tool sets. And they could just use them and consume those modules.
Awesome. We're just 2 minutes under. So Mirabella, do you have any other comments?
I don't have any other comments. I was during the talk, but this is a full-on discussion, and I'm not trying to get into it. There were a few times when you mentioned, for example, you were using quite a few access granting tools. You were passing on security groups, and I kept on thinking, are there? Oh, and I think this can also connect to another question that we've just got in the chat. So I'm going to connect it to that. How do you load secrets, or can you use TF vars?
Yeah, great question. So I'm a bit unsure about the CDK-TF as it exactly currently works. If you can pass them via the CDK-TF CLI as well when you do deploy over there, I think you can. But as we're using Terraform in the background, you can work with CDK with TF var files. So if I were to use the Terraform cloud provider and run my apply there, then I can also make use of those variables and keep the secrets in a way that you would do with Terraform. So as this is just wrapping Terraform from the outside, you still can use those paths. I'm not quite sure whether it's currently possible to supply them when you're doing CDK-TF deploy and then -var whatever for a TF var file as you would do with Terraform. but you can probably supply them via the environment, or if you're using Terraform directly. So you can also do Terraform plan inside the CDK-TF out directory where your JSON file is. So and there you could just use whatever you were used to. So the CDK in that case would just create your configuration that is then going to be used with Terraform.
Thank you, Ansgar. Thank you. So I believe that was the time that we got to grill you a little bit on what you've just presented. Thank you very much once again. And it's time for us to go on to our next talk, which is an introductory talk by Natalia Marek on deploying your React Next.js app with CDK. Let's get on to it.
My name is Natalia, and I'll talk about deployment of React and Next.js applications with CDK. What we'll cover in this talk is first we'll give a short introduction to CDK, since this is an introductory session. Then we'll talk about two ways of deploying React applications. First, we will deploy a Next.js application with Amplify and CDK. And then we will talk about CDK patterns, and we will go into deploying a React application with CDK patterns. So what is CDK? CDK is a framework to define your infrastructure as code and provision services through CloudFormation. It creates CloudFormation stacks that consist of constructs that map into AWS resource. A construct maps into one or more AWS resources. For example, S3.bucket maps onto a bucket in S3. Constructs are represented as types in the programming language of your choice. So CDK supports multiple languages: TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, C#, and as of beginning of April, Go in developer preview. CDK allows us to utilize CloudFormation to provision complex and scalable AWS infrastructure in a repeatable manner. You can use it to provision new environments more efficiently, making it easy to build multiple environments. Here we have an example where we define an app with a single CDK stack, and that stack contains or defines an S3 bucket. Any resources defined here will later on be deployed onto one of the regions in an AWS account. So let's go over this in details. We have a CDK Day stack, and that stack extends stack-based class. We define a constructor that accepts scope, ID, and props, and then we invoke the base class constructor with received scope, ID, and props via super. And next we move on to defining a S3 bucket constructor. And that constructor takes 3 parameters. This, which is referring to the stack that this S3 bucket will be added to, ID of the resource, which is going to be my CDK bucket, and properties defined. So here we will be turning versioning on. We'll block all of the public access to the bucket, and we'll also add server-side encryption with a master key managed by S3. So today we'll talk about 2 ways of deploying React applications with CDK. First, we will deploy a Next.js app using AWS Amplify construct library for CDK. And then we will deploy a React website using S3 React website pattern. But before we jump into deploying our application, let's talk about AWS Amplify. So Amplify is a set of tools, services to develop, deliver, and manage your web and mobile applications. You can make changes easily and easily deploy with only few commands or clicks. You can push changes to version control all through Amplify CLI. You can configure your backend using Amplify CLI or admin UI, and you can use Amplify libraries and UI components to connect your app to your backend. You can also set up continuous workflow and deployment, and this is something that we will be doing in our demo. And any failed deployments won't affect your production traffic. You can also add feature branch deployments, which means that after connecting your first branch, you can create a new feature branch deployment and have main and develop used to test feature without affecting your production. So Amplify framework consists of Amplify CLI, which is a tool chain to create, integrate, and manage AWS services for Amplify app. Amplify console, which is a sort of a control center for your full stack app. You can host your front end web app over there. You can set up your CI/CD. You can initialize and access your admin UI. Next, we have libraries. Amplify offers open source client libraries to build mobile and web apps. Next, we have UI components. Amplify provides a drop-in UI components for authentication, storage, and interaction. And last but not least, we have admin UI, which is a fairly new addition to Amplify framework, and it provides a visual interface for modeling data, adding authentication, authorization, and managing users and groups. So these are some features and tools available in Amplify framework. So we have API, storage, and data store, authentication, functions, user management. So we have all of this. Why would we need CDK in all of that? So CDK gives us more control and enables us to define more detailed and more complex architecture with fine-grained properties, and it offers better integration with existing pipelines. And it also lets us use prepared language to define our infrastructure. This is an architectural overview of the application that we will be deploying. We will be creating code commit repository, Amplify app, API gateway, and Lambda. And all of this will be defined and deployed using AWS CDK. CDK will be converted to CloudFormation template, which will be deployed in the target region to create our resources. We will be adding API Gateway REST API that will enable communication between our Next.js app and Lambda. We will also configure our Amplify application to connect to a newly created code commit repository, and this will trigger Amplify continuous deployment pipeline. And at the very end, Amplify will generate a URL for our Next.js application, which will make our application accessible on the internet. So let's jump in and deploy our Next.js application. First, we will create our Next.js application, and we'll do this by running npx create a next app. Now we will seed it into a newly created app, CDK Day app, and we'll open this in VS Code. So this is a Next.js starter application. We will, however, make a few changes to it, and not many. We'll edit index.js, and we'll do that by adding use effect hook that will showcase the functionality of the Lambda and API gateway REST API that we will be creating with CDK later on. If we run npm run dev now, we'll be able to see how our application looks like. So as you can see, this is just very simple Next.js application. There is this message, something is not working now. After we create our Lambda and API, Gateway REST API, we will be seeing a different message over here. There's a couple of more things that we need to do before we move on to working with CDK. We have to create amplify.yaml file. So this file is necessary for Amplify to build and then deploy our Next.js application. So we have set the base directory to out. If this was the React application, this would be set to build. With Next.js, it has to be set to out for Amplify to be able to build our application. And last, we have to modify package.json file. And the only thing we have to change is set our build script to next build and next export. So let's just add that into next export. And that is it for our Next.js part. We will open a new terminal and we will create our directory for the infrastructure that we will be building. So let's make a directory, let's call it CDK infra. And cd into it. And we'll initialize our CDK application by running CDK init language TypeScript. And this command bootstraps our cloud infrastructure service with all the necessary folders and files. As you can see, it created a lib folder, a bin folder, and several other folders for TS project with Node.js. And lib folder contains a file that we will be editing and where we will be defining our infrastructure. Now this is finished. The next thing that we will do is we will run npm run watch. And this will start our TypeScript compiler in a watch mode, which will monitor our project directory, and it will automatically compile any changes to our TypeScript files to JavaScript. So that will be running in the background. So we have to open a new terminal. And the next thing that we will be doing is we will install all of the modules that we will be needing to create our infrastructure today. So I'm just installing Amplify, code commit, Lambda, and API gateway. And as well as installing it, we have to import them into our CDK infra stack. So that's all imported. First, we will create a code commit repository. So we'll do that, call this Amplify next app April, and this will be a new code commit repository. We add it to our stack. So we're adding this, and then we'll give it ID of Amplify next repo. Next, we'll give it some properties. So it will be a repository name, which we will set to Amplify next repo, and we'll give it a description as well. So we push description. This will be next.js app 3. That will just a simple description for our repository. So this is all done, and we can now deploy our application, and this should create our repository. So we can now run CDK deploy. So as you can see, it has created our repository. We can see it over here, Amplify next app repo, and we have all the details. And we will be connecting this repository to our application later on. Next, we will add our Lambda and API gateway. Right. So let's start with Lambda. Call this hello CDK, and it will be a Lambda function. And again, this will be added to the stack. So we're calling this, and we'll give this an ID of hello CDK handler. And we will set execution environment, and we will indicate where is the directory, our Lambda code. And next we set the handler. So we'll give it a runtime. We'll set it to Node.js. It's going to be Lambda runtime Node.js. And next it will be code will be loaded from Lambda directory that we will be creating in a second. Lambda code from asset Lambda. And the handler will be hello CDK.handler, which means that the file will be called CDK, hello CDK, and the function will be a handler function. So that's all done. And next, before we deploy, we will add API gateway, REST API, and our Amplify application. So let's define our API gateway first. So it will be a new API gateway. Run Lambda REST API. And again, we're adding it to our stack. So we're calling this. Endpoint. It will be backed by our hello CDK function. So the handler will be hello CDK handler. And we need to add cross-origin resource sharing. We need to enable that to allow access to resources. Save that before we move on. And let's add our Lambda directory. We're going to add it over here. So it's going to be called lambda, and we said to call this hello CDK. CDK, and it will be just a very simple lambda function that will return a response. And we will see that message at the front end in our Next.js application later on. And now we will add our Amplify module. So let's go back to our CDK infra stack and let's add our Amplify. So we'll call this Amplify app. Just Amplify app. And this will be a new Amplify app. We have very helpful suggestions. And it will be added to our stack, and we'll give this an ID of Amplify next app, and we'll give it one property, which will be source code provider, which means that it will be connecting to the code commit repository that we have created before. So let's set it to code commit source code provider. And the repository name was Amplify next app repo we have created before. And the last thing that we will do is we will add a main branch to our Amplify app. Branch equals and last we will add a branch to our Amplify app. Add a branch and branch, and now we can run CDK deploy. And when this is deploying, we will be connecting our application to our new repository. Connect our application to this repository, and the new terminal. I'm going to initialize the repository. We'll add a new remote. Add all of the files. Commit all of the changes. And now this is connected. We can see that the changes that we have pushed have triggered Amplify CI/CD. So it is now provisioning our building it, and hopefully it will deploy soon. What we now need to do is we have to go back, and we can see that we have endpoint that we can add to our use effect hook. So we'll go back to our next application. We go to pages, to index.js, and we're gonna paste that URL over here. And then we'll push all of the changes. We should be able to again see that because we have pushed new changes to our repository, it has triggered our continuous deploys. And we should be able to see our application very soon. So now we can see that it has deployed. And if we follow this link over here, our application has been deployed, and we have the message from our Lambda, hello from CDK. So it is all working. And so that was one of the ways of deploying React applications with CDK and Amplify. If we were to deploy a React application, as I mentioned before, the only difference would be build settings. So you would have to make sure that you update amplify.yaml before you deploy your application. That's it for our Next.js application. Let's jump into CDK patterns. So the second way of deploying React applications will be using CDK patterns. CDK patterns is an open source collection of AWS serverless architecture patterns, and it's built using CDK and it references AWS well-architected framework. The idea behind it was to create patterns built and sourced and discussed by AWS heroes and developer advocates. And every pattern follows the same contract. You should be able to clone the pattern, install all of the dependencies, run npm run build, npm run deploy, and it should all deploy. The pattern that we will be focusing on today is an S3 React website pattern. And here is a possible architecture for the S3 React deployment pattern. However, out of the box, this pattern deploys a website to S3 only. You can add CloudFront Route 53 or AWS Certificate Manager by using CDK SPA deploy construct, which I will be showing in our demo. So let's jump in and deploy React application. So we will create a React website with CDK patterns. First, we will bring down a pattern for React website by running npx cdkp init S3 React website. And apart from creating a CDK app, this pattern will also create a React application with all of the dependencies required to run it. Now this is all done, and we can open this in our IDE. It has created CDK and website directory for us. Website directory is just a React starter template application. And if we look into CDK, we can see this SPA deploy construct. And it's a construct that makes it easy to deploy React or Angular websites. And what it does, it is creating a basic site by putting the website in S3. And it does it by telling it that index.doc is index.html and that website folder is in a build directory. And in addition to that, you can also add CloudFront Route 53, and you can do it by installing CDK SPA deploy construct. We will showcase this and we'll add CloudFront distribution. So first we will have to install CDK SPA deploy. And we will add this create site with CloudFront construct and deploy, running npm run deploy. And what it does now is, if we look in package.json, it builds the website first, and then it builds CDK. So it basically is making sure that the website is built before CDK, and then it's deploying it. now it has deployed. We can see two outputs. We have CloudFront domain and S3 URL. So we follow one of them. We can see our React Starter application deployed. If you would like to find out more about what we have covered today, for Amplify, the best place to look for answers and to start with is Amplify documentation. I have also found really useful tutorials and deep dives on AWS channel on Twitch. For CDK patterns, you can find everything about CDK patterns on cdkpatterns.com. And there is also a YouTube channel, Deconstructing AWS CDK Patterns, where Matt Coulter goes over CDK patterns in detail. And for CDK, if you're just starting with CDK, CDKworkshop.com is a really good place to start. And if you know a little bit about CDK, but you want to learn more, CDK Advanced workshop.aws is great as well. Thank you for having me, and over to you.
All right. Thank you, Natalia, for giving us the presentation on React. As you notice, I now have our pancakes costume on. You know, pancakes are official mascot. EJ got to wear them last year, but it's me this year. So very excited. We're going to go ahead and bring in Elad. Hi, Elad. How you doing?
Hello.
Good to have you on. Thank you for joining us. So we're going to go into kind of a quick Q&A section here. We've got a few moments before our next talk starts with Dakota. So we had a couple of questions posed by the chat so far, and we were hoping we could get your input on them. We're going to start with the big one that seems everybody is on everybody's mind. When is V2 coming?
We actually just announced the developer preview of V2 today.
Okay.
So yeah, the blog post is out. I think it's ready, so you can like search for it. I can try and find the link and share it real quick, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit at the end of CDK Day. But developer preview is out, which means that it's the shape and content that we want it to be. We want to give it some time before we declare GA, but it's ready for use, and we're really interested to hear your feedback. So yeah,
fantastic. I know a lot of people are really excited about it. You know, the big thing is the consolidating of packages, so that we don't have individual packages for every single AWS module and things that go out. Can you give us a quick summary of what are some of the other changes we might be expecting with V2?
Yeah, so the monolithic packaging was the main motivation. We realized we took the wrong turn when we first decided to release the CDK into like 1,000 little pieces and created our own little dependency hell. So we had to invest a lot of energy to like roll back that decision, and I hope that that's going to be a huge win for both application developers and library developers, so that they can basically take a peer dependency on the CDK and allow their consumer to decide what CDK version to bring. The second thing that's slightly related to that is that we extracted the construct class from the AWS CDK into the constructs library. And the goal of that change is to enable interoperability between CDKs. We're not seeing too many of those today because that was actually one of the blockers for interoperability. The construct that it was in the CDK was not the same construct that was used in CDK for Kubernetes or CDK for Terraform. And so by extracting constructs into a separate library and having that shared across all CDKs, there's going to be some really interesting use cases enabled by that, and I'm really excited about the future in that sense. Other things that we did for V2 was to eliminate experimental APIs, which I think is also something that people are going to be very excited about. basically just stabilized all the APIs that we could, and we extracted all the other APIs that were not ready for, that are not ready for prime time, and they're going to be released separately. And again, the idea is to give confidence to people that from now on, CDK is going to be fully compatible with semantic versioning, which means that unless we made a mistake, which we will roll back, there are not going to be any breaking change within the same major version. So you should be like confident that when you pick up a new version, your code will continue to work as is, and you'll be able to use all the good stuff for new versions. One last thing was which is something that we're going to do in every major version, is removing all the deprecated APIs and enabling all the feature flags. And so if you're using a deprecated API, you should see some warnings, and those warnings are something that you should consider and like migrate off of those deprecated APIs. In all cases, there should be alternatives to deprecated APIs. And an enablement of feature flags is also something that may change the behavior of your code base. So you should be aware of like which feature flags you're using. And I think that we should probably do a little better helping you migrate from feature flags. That's something that I don't know that we're on point yet. I guess that's it, unless I forgot something. But that's the major things. I think the important thing to note is that it's the same CDK, it's the same code base. Most of the code will not break. Most of the code will be compatible. You're not going to see a huge, like we really deliberately kind of didn't include any features that are big. We wanted to keep this very like easy, the migration.
Gotcha. Cool. Great. Thank you. And it sounds like during your talk here at the end, you're going to be covering a lot about Projen or Projen. How do you prefer we say it?
I don't know.
It's your project. Are you kidding? Projen?
I'm saying Projen, I guess.
Okay,
but,
Projen.
I'm actually not going to cover a lot of Projen, and I'm incredibly amazed that there are like 3 talks about Projen this CDK Day. It's like just mind-blowing to me. Yeah. So my talk is actually not going to be like, I'm not going to cover Projen. I'm not going to talk too much about what it does. I'm just going to play with it a little bit, doing some live coding. So hopefully it's not going to be completely obscure to people who are not familiar with Projen. I'm going to say maybe a few words, but yeah, I hope that other talks cover more. I saw this really cool talk just now about like writing constructs with Projen, and it's amazing. I'm really excited by that.
Very cool. Sathi, do you have any questions that we want to ask?
Yeah, I have one related to Projen, and this is something which is quite close to my heart as well. It was posted in Slack. It goes, does anyone have a sales pitch for Projen?
A sales pitch?
Yeah.
Or like internal?
Like, yes. What's the use case?
It's a good question. I'm struggling with something very similar at Amazon. Like we're trying to like get some funding to productize Projen and make it like a more like production ready. If you're using Projen, it's a very early stage in the project, and the thing is, I'm hearing from people constantly, once I started using Projen, I don't want to go back. I literally hear that a lot. Yep. And so there's definitely value there. And personally, I'm using Projen for all my projects as well. So like we know that there's value, and describing the value hasn't been really trivial for some reason. And I think the biggest, the best way that I can describe it is basically it manages your project toolchain configuration for you. But if someone has a good idea, that'll be pretty useful.
Okay. Cool. Well, we are set and ready to go for our next talk. I hate to cut this short. I wish we could have an hour talking to you about various things, but thank you very much for joining us for this quick Q&A. We will see you a little bit later this morning.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elad. All right. So next up, we have got Dakota. Welcome, Dakota. How you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
Good, good. So you're going to be talking about why security pros have been embracing the CDK.
Why they should, but yes, I am.
Fantastic. Well, whenever you are ready, go ahead and share your screen and we can get you going.
Awesome. Okay. Oh, let me get the correct screen going here.
And to anybody who's watching, I'll be posting a link a little bit later in the Slack channel on Track 2 on where you can get yourself a sweet little pancakes costume like this.
I'll be sure to order that.
I'm keeping this one. AWS can pry it out of my cold, dead hands.
I am having a screen sharing issue.
Ah,
1 second, of
well,
course.
it wouldn't be the only technical issue we've had today, hence the green screen that I've got right now. Apparently the latest copy of Big Sur doesn't play well with Chrome hardware acceleration, so we'll see.
Okay. Do you want to allow?
Meanwhile, a round of thanks and appreciation to our interpreters, Jonathan and Hillary, on track 2, rather. And track 1 as well, we have a couple of different interpreters. They have been doing an amazing job.
Yeah, very glad that we have the interpreters this time around. It was a big miss on our last CDK day, but they've been absolute rock stars, and we definitely appreciate all of their work today on this. And
a shout out to Matthew as well, Matthew Bonek. Most of you don't know this because he's been doing a lot of things in behind the scenes with the switching over of the interpreters, the videos, and whatnot. So thank you, Matthew.
You know, I never thought I'd put producer on my resume, but after this, I may have to do it because it's, I never realized actually how much work there is really in doing this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell you what, do you think do we think we're close, Dakota?
Yeah, 1 second.
Okay. If not, we do have a video that I could play as a quick 90-second break if you need it.
Let's do that.
Okay. So we're going to play a video real quick. This comes from a gentleman who is doing some research and would like your help. So we'll watch this while Dakota gets squared
developers. Ever worried you might be introducing a bug in your code that could affect your infrastructure? Finding it hard to trust using third-party constructs in an application that's continuously deployed by a pipeline? Ever felt unsure about what new CDK code actually does? Introducing C2A, a tool to gain insight into and take control of the changes deployed by CDK updates. This tool is an open source project developed by me, a master's student, with the help of the CDK team that lets you view the effective infrastructure changes before deploying, along with how risky they may be. And because I know that risky doesn't mean the same for everyone, this categorization is fully customizable by you, your team, or your company. And while having this extra information already sounds great, we're taking it a step further. In the same way that you can categorize the changes, you can also pre-approve the ones that you know that meet your standards. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, I need your help to validate this concept. You'll also be helping the CDK team offer you the best experience, contributing to a better ecosystem, and of course, help guide the direction of a new tool. If you'd be willing to take 30 to 45 minutes of your time in late May to give me some feedback, please go on bit.ly/C2A-CDK and leave your contact information. Your participation is crucial for the future of this project and will be greatly appreciated. See you soon.
All right, so let's see if we can get that link up there again. If you can, go ahead and check it out. We would definitely like to help him out with his research. And I can tell you, as someone who's been using the CDK professionally for about a year now, what this is trying to solve is a big problem. It's always difficult and scary to know, what's going to be changed during a infrastructure as code. Are you going to wipe out a database or whatever? So this is going to be a really good tool and they could definitely use your help. So please go fill out that survey and try to help them out. So it sounds like we're still having some sharing problems there, Dakota.
Yeah, I might. Oh.
All right. So we'll let him come back here in just a moment. So to try to answer this question about Projen, Here's how I've tried to sell it in the past. The way that we've done it was pointing out that for every single project, especially for node-based projects, I think Python's probably about the same. When you've got all of these various files, git ignore files, npm ignore files, package.json files, dependency management in the CDK has been a little bit problematic from day one. So we've had those issues along in there. Well, what's nice is Projen allows you to standardize those projects, all of your various projects across an organization or across a team, so that individual developers within a team don't have to worry about the specifics of, well, how do I add in a dependency properly into my construct library? Or should I be including this in my git ignore, or should I not? All of this stuff gets wrapped up into a very familiar API. It is construct based, like we've seen with the CDK, the Terraform CDK, and things like that. So you get this very easy to understand, very easy to follow way of managing your projects. And as Elad said, I'm one of those converts. From as soon as I saw this last fall during the first CDK day, I immediately started adopting it, and it's hard for me to really go back to managing my projects any other way, because it really does make it significantly easier all around. While Dakota is trying to figure out that screen sharing problem, let's see if we can also try to answer some questions along the way that we've got in the chat. Darius, good observation here. Project equals a batteries included way to manage your projects. Yes, exactly. Like, this is a fully formed, fully developed project management that, some of these details you don't have to worry about. Everything comes with smart defaults and things like that. This can be really useful too, especially when it comes to CDK construct development.
There's an interesting chat from Brian as well, which mentions Projen enabling you to only care about the settings that matter to your project.
Exactly. There's all that sort of stuff that can go into a project.json file or git ignores or things like that is cruft. And if you miss it, all of a sudden you can end up with keys or environment variables or things in your projects that you really don't want. And this is a good way to make sure that developers only have to care about the things that they are specifically wanting to care about through good OOP principles and other sorts of things along the way. All right. So, Dakota, welcome back.
Yep. Hang on just a second. I am installing Chrome. Apologies for that.
No problem. No problem.
All
right. We noticed that you got that steady shirt on.
That's right. Yep.
Yes, that's getting a lot of questions. Where can I get the steady T-shirt?
Yeah,
you'd probably have to talk to our VP who sent them out to us. It's good to know that there's a demand for steady T-shirts.
Yes.
So, yeah, and I would try to run through this, but I have a lot of visual content. So Chrome is installing now. This did work yesterday, but the demo gods have struck me down, of course.
Yeah. Again, same thing happened to me. Generally everything was working great up until late yesterday, when all of a sudden, I hop into the stream and my video starts pausing like crazy. And it turned out that apparently there was an update to Big Sur, which affected Chrome's hardware acceleration. So I had to turn off hardware acceleration so that my video would actually work here within StreamYard. Unfortunately, that also means that you don't get the green screen replacement. So everyone gets to see my very unironed, wrinkly green screen that usually sits in the corner of my room.
All right. It's almost done.
All right.
Okay.
So yeah, very excited about the V2 stuff. The not having to constantly install packages over and over is definitely going to be a lot nicer and a lot easier to go for. I'm looking forward to seeing also what other sort of fun stuff comes out of the V2. I don't expect many changes. As Elad said, their goal was to really just try to solve that monolithic versus individual package thing first, and then we'll talk about, future versions. We'll hopefully see some other questions.
I keep falling into the same problem of trying to get to work on some CDK module, and then I'm like trying to synthesize it and it's failing, and then I realized I didn't install it. So CDK V2 is going to be really helpful.
Yep.
Brian's got a very interesting question. What's the story behind the Stacks mascot?
Okay, so pancakes. So what happened with pancakes? Last year during the first CDK day, we jokingly put out a tweet saying, hey, CDK needs a mascot. And it ended up landing on the otter. Now, since the CDK mostly deals with stacks and creating and destroying stacks, his official name is Stacks. However, all of his friends call him Pancakes because pancakes come in stacks. Can't really say much more than that. It was just a very organic sort of run of mental processes that happened on Twitter one day. But we've got a actual Pancakes mascot. If you go out, he is a open license to use all you want. You can slap him on anything. We've had stickers produced in the past, and we've handed out a few of them. We will continue to do so as people ask for them. I'll be glad to send stickers to whoever needs them along the way. All right, Dakota, what do you think? We close?
Almost there. I actually found instructions to set the privacy.
All right.
So then we should be good.
Hey, it wouldn't be a live conference without, a few hoops to jump through at the end.
For a security talk without security settings breaking my presentation.
Yeah. Renee mentioned you're probably using IE6, which is where the issue is.
All right, screen recording.
Or Safari. We did find that out late yesterday. Safari does not play well with StreamYard.
Yep. Where does one find an Otter 1C?
I will post a link over on the CDK .dev Slack on the track 2 channel, and I'll go ahead and post on the track 1 channel as well. I'll post a link to a place where you can get your own pancakes onesie. He does not come with any sort of logo, but he does come with a clam in his front pocket because apparently otters love clams. All right. Hopefully one more try with Dakota and we'll get started here in just a moment. So Satya, tell us, have you been using the CDK for your daily work, or are you just here as a fanboy?
I'm here as a fanboy. Fun fact, I actually put forward, I posted a blog post about CDK Day just a few hours back. And for the first CDK Day, I put forward a CFP. I put forward a talk, but it was not selected. But no hard feelings. The competition is quite tough. I've seen how crazy awesome our talks are. And I wanted to give back to the community. So this is the best way that I can do. Support, volunteer, help out.
Very cool.
And we have Dakota.
Well, thank you. Yes, we do. All right.
There we go. Sorry about that. A lot of hoops. I got it figured out finally.
No problem.
Awesome.
Well, everybody, this is Dakota. He's going to be telling us about why security pros should be embracing the CDK, and it is all yours.
Awesome. So, guys, thanks so much for attending and bearing with me through my fighting with security settings relevant to the talk today. I'm Dakota Riley. I'm a security engineer at Steady, and I'm going to talk about specifically why I believe security professionals should embrace the CDK and kind of our story with our security and operations team and why I believe it's actually made our company more secure. So just start off just a little bit about Steady. We're a business-to-business SaaS software trading startup with a goal of processing every business-to-business transaction on the planet. We have team members literally everywhere. Kentucky, Poland, Australia, there's probably a Steady individual near you. I wouldn't be too surprised. And we use a mix of AWS native serverless services, SaaS tooling, and surprisingly, we orchestrate all of our serverless things with the AWS CDK. So diving into the talk itself, I kind of wanted to stick to 3 clear points why I believe the CDK will actually make you more secure. And the first being that it's probably going to make your IAM policies better across the company. The second being that it's really easy to put out flexible constructs for dev teams to meet security requirements and still do IAC the way they want to do it. And then lastly, you can benefit from your existing static analysis tooling. Cool. So before I dive into those points, just a quick recap on what an L2 construct is, because it's basically the boilerplate of my talk. So L2 constructs are what initially drew me to wanting to use the AWS CDK. Just because they let you worry less about writing like boilerplate CloudFormation code, bubblegum and shoestring 3 different CloudFormation resources together, and more about the configuration of your resource itself. They provide kind of a intent-based interface for configuring, your resources. So as kind of a side effect of that, security-related configurations are actually much easier to do and reason about. An example included on my slide there is the bucket enforce SSL parameter. I'm sure if you work in a company where you have a security team and they're responsible for compliance, you've been nagged about enforcing encryption and transit on your S3 buckets, which was normally a bucket policy. This actually becomes a lot easier because you can literally just make a parameter change and you've met that requirement. So specifically, though, what I'm going to actually focus on is the way the L2 constructs have kind of wrapped IAM in a sane and accessible way. IAM hygiene in general is usually a big security problem at a lot of companies. It's very powerful for granting access. There's something like 8,000 different actions, and each of those actions support a number of different resource types and ARNs. However, it's not without a learning curve, right? It's one of those things where, especially like teams new to the cloud, it can end up being something that's just make it work so we can ship the code. In my past life as a security consultant, if I wanted to find the low-hanging fruit of security issues, I would usually go shake up a company's IAM policies and find problems there, right? So most of your L2 constructs that involve, any type of access offer methods, native methods on the construct itself for common access patterns. And quite frankly, this blew my mind. I've spent a lot of time dabbling in JSON and IAM, but and I feel like longtime users of the CDK almost like take this for granted or may not even be aware it exists, but enables teams who are not necessarily IAM experts to easily discover these common access patterns and generate a least privileged IAM policy. If you're using the TypeScript CDK, you have IntelliSense, and we've got this at the earliest part of the SDLC in the developer's IDE. Just as a concrete example, we have kind of like a before and after, where on the left-hand side, we have a bit of CDK code, right? I used a role in this case for just a simple example, but pretty much almost any resource that has a role coupled with it or construct that has a role coupled with it, so a Lambda function or an EC2 instance can be used for this example. We're instantiating a table, and then we're granting write-level access to that table. So on the right-hand side, you can actually see what gets synthesized and deployed is a policy that has action scoped to that ideal level of access, and it's scoped to that particular resource. And then, of course, that policy is attached to that role or that principal in this case. And it's important to call it, too, that like your dev teams are going to know, like they're writing the code, they're going to know what level of access they need to grant. They know they need to write to the DynamoDB table. What they might not know is the specific actions and ARNs involved in that. Having some issues with slides. Hang on just a second. Maybe if we make it. There we go. Okay. Awesome. All right. So to that point, let me go back here, see if that helps. Apologies. We're just having a slew of fun technical issues today, aren't we? So it's kind of hard to see right now. That's getting kind of garbled. But what I did specifically, I'll try to recap it, is I wanted to kind of test my own assertion. When I came to Steady, I initially kind of shook down some of these, and I was really surprised when I didn't find a ton of issues. So for the purpose of the talk, I actually went and pulled data from around 467 Lambda function rules. That's the number of Lambda function rules we have in production that are created by the CDK. And I audited their permissions across S3, DynamoDB, and Secrets Manager. I picked those 3 to scope it for the purpose of a 10-minute talk, and also because those are things that access data, and that I know that we use the L2 constructs to instantiate those things. So out of 467, I only found 12 were not using specific S3 actions. They still had resource level permissions. 3 were not using DynamoDB specific actions. and then literally 0 out of the ones that were using Secrets Manager were all scoped properly. The overwhelming majority had a combination of action level and resource level permissions. So it's, while it's 100%, it's not 100% possible to say that this is completely because of the CDK, but I can tell you that having these common access patterns accessible and that early in the AWS CDK to the developers and their IDE definitely did not hurt our chances. Cool. Okay. Let's see here. Oh man, yeah, that slide is still. Let me see if I change it. Okay. That's. I'll go ahead and I'll just roll through this one. But the next point of the talk is talking about templating out secure constructs to teams. So what you would actually see on my screen, if it was rendering correctly, is that we asked our service teams to protect their publicly facing API gateway endpoints with a WAF as part of our SOC 2 journey. We operate in the model that teams own their stack, fully like a full stack model, and we ask them to meet said requirements. So when we were going through this initially, we kind of discovered a few hiccups in the ask, in that the cloud formation for working with WAF v2 is very verbose. That configuration itself kind of requires a little bit of security domain knowledge. It's not just pick up and go necessarily, because there's rule sets you have to apply. And then there was no existing L2 construct for the web application firewall. So surprise, surprise. Oh, too bad you can't actually see it, but we wrote a construct. We basically, what we did is a number of things. We provided a same set of defaults of AWS managed rule sets. So that way, if a team just needed to meet our requirement, they could grab our construct and apply it. We were also very careful not to abstract away the underlying resources that are involved in that WAF, the web ACL and things like that, and added methods to allow them to add new rules when they reach that level of maturity. And then my favorite thing is we made heavy use of doc strings, in that the documentation can live with the code itself, which kind of helps eliminate that domain knowledge gap in some ways. We actually got direct feedback from a team that said, hey, do you guys have any examples on how to deploy your WAF construct? And I think we were busy doing something at the moment. And 5 minutes later, they come back and they say, never mind, I figured it out using IntelliSense, nice doc strings. So it's just one thing where it's like if we can minimize the number of places a developer has to go to get that information, it's just going to result in a better outcome. Okay, and to my last point, I wanted to briefly touch on static analysis because it felt weird talking about infrastructure as code security without talking about static analysis. So for those who don't know, static analysis is essentially just checking code for known bad patterns without actually executing it. And it's kind of been a hot button thing in infrastructure as code in general. And an adoption blocker at a lot of companies is, hey, we don't have the right tools in place to enable that technology. But one thing I want to call it with the CDK is because at the end of the day, it synthesizes to CloudFormation. So you can use the great ecosystem of CloudFormation static analysis tools that are available today. Two I've used in the past, which you would be able to see if the slides weren't messing up, are CF Guard and Checkoff. So CF Guard, it's maintained by AWS. It's written in Rust, so it's lightning fast. So if you have a concern about deployment time, it's a great place to start. And the rules are written using a domain-specific language, so they're really simplistic. And then Checkoff is developed in Python. And there's roughly 80 checks that come out of the box to use. And they work great both as a local tool. You just have to have the developers synthesize their stacks and feed them in, or a deploy time check, which is what we do at Steady. We put an API in front of CF Guard and let our pipelines feed the templates to them. Cool. So wrapping up. First of all, the AWS CDK in general just makes it easier for developers to do the right thing. I mean, we're putting the knowledge of best practices, like I said, as early as it can go in the SDLC, like in their IDE. They don't have to go hunting around the docs to write our least privilege IAM policy, right? We make it easy to meet our own security requirements. And then by our security team adopting the CDK ourselves, it's just easier to speak the same language, right? Reviews, code reviews, and remediation exercises just become really simple because we're talking the same thing. And it's just generally much easier to reason about than raw CloudFormation, YAML, have you not? So it appears like you can see my contact information at the bottom. If anything in the talk was interesting to you at all, or you just want to chat or have questions, you can definitely reach out to me directly via email, LinkedIn, or GitHub. Happy to chat. I'll also figure out a way to make the slide deck available on my GitHub. I apologize for the technical difficulties. And again, thanks everyone.
All right. Thank you, Dakota. Appreciate it. Yeah, sorry about the technical issues. Just as a quick cleanup on that, we are running about probably about 10, 15 minutes behind right now. So we're going to do what we can to try to catch up as quick as we can. So let's go ahead and move on. We've got our next video. This is coming from, let's see here, Oksana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oksana Horlock. I'm a software developer based in Oxfordshire, United Kingdom, and today I'm going to tell you about my experience with CDK as a cloud newbie. So before my AWS journey, which started exactly 1 year and 1 month ago, my interactions with infrastructure were limited to logging on to the remote server that was hosted in a traditional data center, copying files onto it, occasionally checking errors, but that's it really. So when I started a new job at the beginning of the first lockdown last year, I was really excited because I knew I'd be working with AWS. However, I felt a bit overwhelmed because there are a lot of Amazon Web Services that exist, and some of them, like IAM, consist of a lot of different concepts that are easy to get wrong, and it's important to get right. Well, at work we use Terraform, and while I was really keen to learn how to define infrastructure as code, as an AWS beginner user, I found HashiCorp configuration language a bit hard to understand and write. So while I was attending one of the AWS online events last year, I attended a talk about the Cloud Development Kit. I found it really intriguing and interesting and decided to explore it in my free time and use it to get myself up to speed with AWS. While I did use the console as well to learn about AWS offerings, I purposefully decided to use CDK more because infrastructure as code is definitely the way forward, and that's what we use at work. So why should an AWS newbie explore CDK? Firstly, CDK uses familiar programming languages. So if you're a developer and you're looking to learn more about AWS, chances are CDK exists in a language that you use, or in a language that's similar to the language you use on a daily basis. It really eases the learning curve because you don't need to focus on the language you don't know. Instead, you just focus on the infrastructure you want to create. Secondly, while using CDK, you can see how resources are connected without having to jump in between different services or screens in the console. And if you want to create multiple resources, you can do it all in your code editor. So for example, if you want to create a Fargate service and then you want to explore what VPC configuration is created and what role with what permissions are created, you can explore the CDK-generated CloudFormation templates. CDK is also great in that it provides a really good authoring experience and your usual tools that you use in your daily job facilitate learning. So thanks to the IntelliSense built into your IDE, you can learn about different resources, services, their methods and properties. Another reason why CDK is great is that it allows you to learn about best practices in AWS because CDK constructs provide sensible defaults. For example, instead of granting a Lambda function full access to a DynamoDB table in the grant read write data method, the actions are limited to a few. CDK patterns created by Matt Coulter and the team can enable an AWS newbie to discover common serverless infrastructure patterns in AWS. And because they implement principles of well-architected framework, they can really assist newbies in seeing these principles in practice. This might not be a plus for everyone, but it certainly was for me. Some labs and documentation are great in that if there's something missing or if there are issues or bugs, it makes you investigate workarounds and learn even more about AWS services. For example, while experimenting with CDK pipelines, I discovered that I cannot create a pipeline that uses a GitHub repo called main without explicitly stating the branch name, because the default is still master. Also, if you create a code stack connection via CDK and deploy it, the status of the connection is pending, and you need to change it manually in the console. I come from a .NET programming background, and I discovered that there are many more examples in TypeScript or Python. So when there is a CDK stack or construct example in a language that you're not used to working with, while it might not be very hard to convert it into the language that you work with, it accelerates learning because it's not giving to you on a plate, and you learn better and you remember things better by doing. Another thing is that with CDK, it's really easy to delete resources by running CDK destroy command. To ensure that you don't incur charges when experimenting, I think it's really important for a cloud newbie. And it really saves time because you don't have to go from one service into another in the console and look for the resources that you need to delete. I haven't met any CDK aficionados in person yet, but I feel that the community is really amazing. It's really friendly to newcomers, regardless of their level of knowledge of AWS or programming, and the community members are always ready to lend a helping hand. How has CDK helped me personally? Well, I definitely feel more confident getting involved in AWS discussions at work. One of our teams does use CDK, and a work colleague who does use it, who I've spoken to, really enjoys using it. He finds it really easy to work with, and he says that it's great to create infrastructure programmatically. I think there is also an interest to explore other infrastructure code tools, and I think that CDK, especially CDK for Terraform, will probably be quite high on the preference list. I have recently passed an AWS Developer Associate exam, and CDK helped me in that I was able to explore CloudFormation templates and generated by it, and in this way learn about CloudFormation syntax. And CDK pipelines, tutorials and examples were of great assistance in understanding AWS CI/CD tools better. Getting into public speaking was something that I had wanted to do for a while, and I think that I was so impressed and inspired by the AWS Cloud Development Kit that I really wanted to share how great it was. So first I did a presentation at work about CDK, and then at a couple of meetup events. And in this way, I was finally able to give back to the tech community from which I've learned, and I'm still learning a lot. As I mentioned, CDK community is very friendly to newcomers regardless of their level of AWS proficiency. So I think that's what encouraged me to start contributing to CDK. There are also some very helpful posts and a video by Adam Ruka about contributing to CDK. And yes, I found it really amazing that I was able to make a contribution, even with not so much AWS experience. Here are the resources that I found really useful on my AWS CDK journey that I would recommend. And I still have a lot to learn about AWS and CDK, but looking at where I was at the beginning of last year and where I am now, I feel that I have made quite a big leap in terms of my professional and personal development, thanks not only to the opportunities to have practical AWS experience at work and support of my colleagues in the very unsettling times of the pandemic, but also to the CDK. I'm very excited to continue to explore it and to be a part of such a supportive community. And I would strongly encourage AWS beginners who are like me, coming from the developer background and are looking to get themselves up to speed with AWS, to check out the CDK. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Oksana. Someone was asking in the chat, actually, what the best way to learn CDK would be. So I'm sure this was very helpful for understanding more around how to actually get started. Next on, we've actually got a little bit of a change of theme because we are going to learn about automated diagrams for CDK infrastructure from Tom, who's going to talk to us about CDK-Dia.
Hi, CDK fellows. Thank you for participating in the CDK Day. My name is Tom, and I'm a developer based in Berlin, Germany. I've been using the AWS CDK for 2 years now, and today I want to share with you a project I've been working on. So in our last project, our team was building a rather cloud-native application, and we used CDK for our infrastructure. And we were building a lot, and our stacks had so many resources, and we were using so many building blocks, and CDK, it really enabled us in the project. But then one learns that with this great power to add resources fast, there comes a great diagramming responsibility. And diagrams, they are really important because they are great when you want to reason about changes you want to make, or when you want to onboard new colleagues, or just for general documentation when you need like a refresh about how an application is wired up. So given this dynamic and fast-growing nature of our CDK application, updating our manually created diagrams, it became quite challenging to keep up with. And it was clear we are accumulating sometimes what I would call like a diagrammic debt. So being a DevOps enthusiast, I was wondering, how can I automate this? And I looked into some tools available out there, and there really are a lot of tools available in this space. So let's take a look into a few of those diagramming approaches. The first group is what I call an AWS crawler. And these solutions, they basically work like a crawler. So you give read-only access policy for your whole account, and they will go and query all supported AWS services. They will figure out what is provisioned, and then it will create you a diagram. And while there are really great products out there, this crawling thing, it feels to me a little bit like reverse engineering. And in this case, reverse engineering is not needed because we have the source code. And our CDK code is very clear, and it clearly describes the structure and the constructs and the resources, and it even has information about the relationships between these. So I moved on to the next group of diagramming solutions, which is basically diagramming a CloudFormation template. And I think this is generally a better approach than the previous one. And again, there are really great tools out there in this group. But still, when CDK synthesizes code to a CloudFormation template, there is a lot of data loss. So specifically, much of the structure is kind of flattened, and the diagram that you get is rather flat. So you lose all the topology and the clustering information that your CDK code contains. So seeing these tools out there and different approaches, I decided that there is a real justification for a CDK-based diagramming tool. And thanks to the Corona pandemic, I had a lot of free time recently, and I decided to go for a side project that creates such a tool. And that's CDK-Dia. So CDK-Dia is available on GitHub and NPM. And I'm really looking forward to see how will you use it. So let's see a few diagram examples from CDK-Dia. Here we see a basic data ingestion and processing application. So we can see here that CDK-Dia clusters CDK constructs. So it's clear for us which resources are part of the ingestion construct and which belong to the processing construct. And additionally to those icons or nodes, in this diagram, we also have edges. So we can see how these resources interact with each other. Now, let's look at another example. So here we see a classic three-tier architecture with a web, database, and application layers. And this is the default diagram of this application. So that's what you get out of the box when you run CDK-Dia. And in these diagrams, all of the constructs are collapsed. So the amount of detail here is rather low, but naturally under the hood, CDK is provisioning many more resources. So let's say that for our use case, we actually want to see all of those details. For this, we can run CDK-Dia with the collapsed equals false flag, and then we get an uncollapsed diagram with lots of details. So as you can see here, or maybe it's a little hard for you to see because the diagram is really big and has much white space, which is something I plan to improve. This diagram of the same application now has all the resources and details. So let's zoom in for a second at this VPC part. So this was just one node or icon in the previous collapse diagram. And now we have so much detail about it. And it's very useful if you need some sort of a high resolution diagram, you want to get all the details, etc. When thinking about this project, I also stumbled into another concept, which is a diagram as code. And I was wondering, how does diagram as code fit into CDK-Dia? And for this purpose, CDK-Dia has those decorators, which you can use with your CDK constructs. So the idea here is that using these decorators, you can customize your diagrams as part of your CDK code. So, the benefit here is that you can have those tweaks applied whenever you regenerate a diagram. Now, currently, the only such decorator implemented is one which sets the collapsing or uncollapsing of specific constructs. So, in contrast to this global collapse flag we saw before, in this diagram now, only the DB construct or layer was decorated with a forced non-collapse flag. So this is very useful if there is a specific part of your application which contains some sort of complexity or some sort of customization for which you want to diagram more details or like put a spotlight on. And I have ideas for many such other decorators. So maybe one can set a custom icon or a custom text or not diagram at all a specific resource or construct or set other diagram properties. So what's next? Well, I'm really looking forward to developers taking CDK-Dia for a test run and to getting some feedback. Additionally, there are many features and improvements one can think of, and I'll be really happy to have some additional contributors to the project. And for this, I added a few GitHub issues that you can implement if you're interested. So that's it. Thank you for watching and enjoy your rest of your CDK day. Bye-bye.
All right, that was Tom Roshko with CDK-Dia. Thank you so much, Tom. Next up, we have Florian on how to move your Amplify generated CloudFormation stack to CDK.
All right, and real quick, we're trying to bring in our other interpreter, but it looks like there's a little bit of a problem with the video, so we're going to let Jonathan run for the next session as well until we can get that squared away. But yes, let's go ahead and get started with the Amplify talk.
Hi everyone, my name is Florian and I'm part of a dev team at AWS, and today I'm going to go through how to migrate an Amplify app to a CDK one. So first, let me give you a bit of context of the why of this subject. At the beginning of COVID situation, my team got a new project to build a video conference tool enabling presenters to stream local video efficiently, so not through the standard share screen with bad audio, and be able to add quizzes and polls during the presentation. And the deadline was, as always, as soon as possible. So the first feature I got assigned to was this polling quiz capability that would need for sure authentication and authorization, as well as a push mechanism to push the question to attendees and spread response counts. So AppSync, the AWS GraphQL service, is a perfect fit for this kind of use case, thanks to its real-time capability through GraphQL subscriptions. And I also needed a database to store those data. And with this tight deadline, I decided to use Amplify to build this, since it's exactly the type of architecture it has been built for, and it simplifies greatly the setup of all those resources. And while I was developing my part, my teammates started working on the video side using our standard development process, using CDK and our hardened construct and reusable CI/CD one. Great, we were moving fast, but at some point I needed to migrate my Amplify app into my team CDK one. So before going into this migration story, let me just go through a quick reminder around Amplify. So Amplify is composed of three main components: a framework providing a client-side library facilitating the interaction with AWS services, such as API Gateway, Cognito, or AWS AppSync. It's providing as well a set of UI components to easily implement common front-end features, such as sign-in and sign-up pages. But it also comes with a command line capable of generating CloudFormation templates, AppSync VTL, and GraphQL client code with simple commands. And last but not least, it's as well a managed service, providing a hosting solution for your front-end artifacts, but as well an automatically configured CI/CD pipeline and an admin UI enabling you to manage your data and backend categories. So we're going to focus really quickly. We're going to focus here on this backend generation command line. When you run Amplify add category, auth here, the Amplify command line will generate the following structure. Under Amplify backend, you will retrieve a folder for each category and a subfolder for each instance of it. And last but not least, in this subfolder, you will find two really important files: the CloudFormation template generated by the command line and the parameters.json containing the CloudFormation stack parameters that are going to be passed to the template at the execution time of the stack. And when you run Amplify push, this will generate a folder called AWS CloudFormation containing the root stack of your Amplify app. And especially this stack will reference all the nested stack I was presenting before for each of your categories. So here we see that the category is auth and the instance is CDK demo blah blah blah, and it points to the template that I was mentioning before, but here uploaded to S3 by the Amplify push command. Seeing that, you might be thinking that you probably can use all those generated files directly in your CDK app to merge your Amplify app into a CDK one. And you're right. Thanks to a great construct called CloudFormation include. you simply have to point to the template you want to include, and it ended up being a resource like any other in your CDK app. So let's see now how it would look like in our Amplify case. In your CDK app, you simply have to point to the root stack I was mentioning before, load the nested stack to make sure they get uploaded to the right S3 buckets and therefore and therefore retrievable by your root stack. And that's it. Your CDK app is now spinning up Amplify created templates. To be honest, what I described is true for most categories that are only made of CloudFormation stacks, such as storage, auth, analytics, or others. But for some of them, like API or functions, they have external resources, such as resolver file for AppSync resolvers, or your index handlers for your function, for your Lambda function, for instance. And in that case, it's a bit more complicated because they need to be uploaded first before instantiating the nested stack. I won't go into the details of the implementation here for those migration due to lack of time, but basically the idea is to leverage S3 deployment construct to upload those external resources into the right folder. As you can see here, where I upload the API resolver to the right S3 buckets expected by the Amplify CloudFormation. So don't worry, all this code is on my GitHub that I'll share at the end of the presentation, and you will be able to get the full view of what is done here. But basically here, the idea is really to leverage this S3 deployment construct to mimic what Amplify push is capable of. So now that we migrated our Amplify app into CDK, I would like to highlight the fact that the CFN include construct exposes an API enabling you to easily access any output of the included stack. So you can easily link your Amplify generated templates with your CDK one. So for instance, you see here that the auth template has a specific output called identity pool ID, and you probably will need that into other resources into your CDK app. And so that's how you can easily access it using the get output function and the value attributes. So what's next? Now you can extend your Amplify app with CDK. So you can potentially, I don't know, add custom hosting with CloudFront and Lambda at Edge that is currently not supported with Amplify. Or add CI/CD with CDK pipelines if you're doing trunk-based deployment, development, and multi-account deployment. And if you're looking for working example of everything I presented today, and more, do not hesitate to go to my GitHub that is showing here. So FLOCHAZ, and you will find this Amplify to CDK Day 2021 example that shows exactly all what I showed today. To conclude, I like to summarize and list the tips to be able to reuse your Amplify generated code into your CDK app. So first of all, leverage CloudFormation include construct to include your generated template. If you're not using complex categories, you can go straight to the generated root stack. Else, use the categories nested stack and leverage AWS S3 deployments to upload the specific resources of your categories, such as resolvers or handlers for functions. And something I didn't mention, to make sure that all Amplify generated CloudFormation templates work in CDK out of the box, you will have to set the stack name attributes when creating your CDK app stack with the following pattern. Each of these variables needs to be lowercase and without a dash, because what's happening is some of the Amplify generated CloudFormation templates will use the fn select intrinsic function to split these elements and find some of those variables. And one last tip, you might have realized that some Amplify categories are sometimes generating YAML templates instead of JSON one. And for some reason, CDK CloudFormation construct don't support YAML as well as JSON. So feel free to flip them to JSON with CFN flip to solve those parsing issues. Oh yeah, and last but not least, You can reuse those techniques with any CloudFormation-based solutions, such as AWS Quick Start, AWS Solutions, or any other code you find on GitHub based on CloudFormation. So you can leverage them all. And that's it for me today. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any question, do not hesitate to contact me either on Twitter, on GitHub, or directly on our CDK.dev Slack channel. Have a good day.
Thanks, Florian. Next up, we've got Ken, who is here with us and is going to talk to us a little bit about Projen. So publishing external Projen modules as private GitHub packages. Let's see. Over to you, Ken.
Oh, thanks, Marabella. All right, so I'm going to change this up a little bit. There's been a lot of talk in both tracks on using Projen, why I should use Projen. So originally I wanted to go from 0 to 60 and show in 10 minutes that we could get an external package going. We're going to take a step back from that. I'm still going to show that off and what it looks like. You can find the code afterwards, but I also wanted to talk about the why. So a little bit about me. I'm Ken Winter. I'm an engineer at Steady, and I've worked with the CDK for a little over 1.5 years or so. And I didn't start using Projen until Elad's presentation at CDK Day 2020. So I saw his presentation and I thought, man, this is amazing. I really want to use this and it'll make all of my projects kind of fall in line. So I started using it, and I'd say maybe about a month later, saw some people in the CDK Dev Slack workspace. So Matthew, one of the hosts today, right? And talking about how to make our own projects that don't have to get merged into Projen. So he put together an RFC on GitHub. We were talking through it and then just kind of went at it to make it work. And we ended up with how it exists today, which you can do npx projen new -- from. Like I said, I'll show this off, but wanted to give a little bit of that history, right? So then I created the CDK AppSync project. And this was meant to be kind of in the spirit of what Florian just showed. And, taking this kind of like Amplify-like experience and creating that for yourself. So it uses a construct that I wrote, and it will create a cognito setup for you in AppSync. And you kind of get this experience all out of the box just from writing npx projen new and then pointing to that package. So let's go ahead and jump into this GitHub package. Here on GitHub, you can find at KC Winter CDK Day 2020, all of the code we're going to look through. I've uploaded a package here to GitHub Packages, so you can see 0.13 version. And here you got some instructions how to kind of walk through everything, right? This was made with Projen using npx projen new JSII. And let me just go ahead and quickly show the project. So we'll hit that KC Winter package, CDK Day - 2021. And this is going to fail the first time, but I also wanted to show that portion off. So it's installing the module. And here we get that error, right? And if we look right about here, we'll see multiple projects found after installing. So my project type has 2 projects in one, and one is a CDK project and one is a library project for just a TypeScript application. So let's go ahead and do that again with CDK Day - project. So re-downloads and pulls that project, starts setting everything up. Here you can see all of the synthesized files, and I've got some my own sample code files in there. So if we look, it's set up the repo the way that I like, and you can see, the main.ts, and then you can see the lib, which actually has my stack. Then if I had some constructs, I'd throw them in there. But if we take a look at this main, it generated, these fake account values that I had hard coded in there, a pipeline stage, a stage extending CDK stage, and then a pipeline stack, some different parameters that this takes. And then we've got this. And so, for my organization or for my team, this may be the setup that I want. And maybe it's not quite meant to be a construct, right? So I want to do this reliably over and over, but some things don't make sense to be a construct. So if we run npx projen synth, it'll synthesize this stack out, and then we'll get to see that YAML. So all with just running npx projen new from, I've got all of this happening, right? And I think that's a pretty powerful story for teams in using this across your organization. So if we take a look at the actual code to set this up, we've got it using Projen. So here the repo name is KC Winter CDK Day 2021. It's got the repository URL, the author, etc. A few dependencies that we need, and then these two values right here. That's pretty much it, and then everything is going, right? Sounds too good to be true. If we jump into the actual project, you can see the CDK Day project extends the AWS CDK TypeScript app. So it uses the same basic project options that you can pass in, and then I've created my own prettier ignore settings here, and it will just pass those lines to the prettier ignore. And then you'll want to actually override some values, most likely. So we're saying sample code false for the defaults, because we want to create our sample code if our users from the organization are using it. Since this is an organizational internal project, we'll have licensed set to false. And then we're setting this CDK version to 195.2. So what this is saying is only use this. The user is never going to be able to override that. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is maybe you have dependencies that you want to reach across, 10 applications, and you want to upgrade them all at once. You could set those values in here, dependabot updates these, and then you can go from there. I think that also provides a pretty good story. Then you can just update those projects to the latest, and then they get that new version dependency, and maybe they can override it, maybe they can't. We set some default CDK dependencies that we wanted to add, and then we added some sample code here. And then moving down, this is where I hard-coded those account values. Maybe you have some place where you store all those values, or you need to pull those in. You could do it this way. This is, just for the example. And then I automatically create these like Pascal case project types, the contents for the file. Moving on, and the stack contents. And then we also create the test. So if we look at the test, it's just a basic test to make sure that it has an SNS topic. And if we look at the stack that was created, it's just a simple SNS topic, and it sends some subscriptions to some different emails. So I know that's kind of a lot of information just going through this, but it really has helped me in the last, 6 months to a year using all of this and having a kind of standardized way of creating these projects. If we take a look at the README, this one, you can see here, right now you have to use a personal access token with GitHub. I'm working on a way to make it work with the secrets.github token. Definitely open to any help. You can find me in Twitter or something like that. But that pretty much wraps up what I have for the Projen GitHub packages. Also, I used to say Projen, and then, about an hour ago, Elad mentioned that he says Projen, and I thought it was Projen. So in preparation for today, I've been trying to switch myself, and now I'm trying to switch back. Hope to see you all in the CDK Dev Slack. Like I said, you can find this on GitHub. You can hit me up there. I've got a blog post on a full walkthrough on how to go from 0 to 60, and a YouTube video highlighting that as well. Yeah, great. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Ken. It looks like Projen is going to be the new GIF.
Yeah.
You can follow and if you have any questions for Ken, you can all follow him on the Slack. Next up, we have one of my favorite AWS developer advocates, Darko Mesaroš. I hope I got that right.
Yes.
If not, please forgive me. Still a big fanboy of you. I love your streams. Yes. And I love what you do with retro hardware, the Sun workstations and whatnot. Darko is going to talk about how to avoid bad things in prod by testing CDK. And this is something which I don't do quite a lot as well. So Darko, all over to you.
Thank you, Satya. And you said my last name, okay? I would better than a lot of people. So thank you very much. And yeah, thank you very much for having me. I guess it's time to kick off. So we managed the screen share. First of all, Hillary, thank you very much for trying to interpret what I say. This is a first for me, so thank you. As in the immortal words of every presenter, let me share my screen and let's talk about how can you avoid bad things in production by testing your CDK code in this case, right? So my name is Darko, and today we will be covering a lot of things when it comes to testing your CDK and in general, the things that CDK does. Let's get started. Infrastructure as code is just great, right? I love it. It changed the way I do things in the cloud. But let me ask you a question. What's the connection between infrastructure as code and the nuclear weapons? I'll leave you on this cliffhanger for a second here, and I'll answer the question in a couple of slides. So what about infrastructure as code? It's this wonderful thing that's going somehow slow. It's this wonderful thing that enables you to, instead of clicking a whole bunch of times to provision infrastructure, you can use the power of code to make infrastructure happen, which is just wonderful. It's an amazing thing, and it's just changed the way we do things, especially at scale. I used to provision servers by racking and stacking them. I used to provision servers by installing operating systems on them. But things have changed, right? Now you can provision all the things in the world with a single stroke of a key. But there's where the problem lies. Let me go back to nuclear weapons. Think about this. In the old times, you would throw rocks and spears at people, right? You could maybe hurt somebody, one person, right? Or a bunch of them. Then somebody made guns, cannons. Oh, you can hurt a bunch of people, but again, it's still limited to a subset of group. All of a sudden, there are nuclear weapons. And a wrong, dare I say it, keystroke, can cause massive problems, can destroy all the things we like. The same is with infrastructure. When you used to provision infrastructure with your clickety-clicks and your racking and stacking, you were doing it at small scale. So a mistake usually meant just a thing broke, or maybe a couple of things broke. But when you deploy things at scale with infrastructure as code, CDK in this case, you have the ability to deploy things at massive scale, but at the same time, you have the ability to destroy things at massive scale. So same as with nuclear weapons and all the double keys and presidents, nuclear footballs and whatnot, we have the same thing when it comes to CDK or infrastructure as code. We need to have testing, gates, approvals in place to make sure that our change doesn't destroy things. Picture it like this. It's a lovely rainy Friday morning. You spend your time in front of your computer building this lovely CDK code. You make your infrastructure. You add all the new famous. You're moving to Graviton 2. You're going to harness the power of ARM to make your things work. You make sure you test it. It works on your machine. It works in your AWS account. That's amazing, right? Well, are you sure it's going to work in the other account? What if all of a sudden you have no limits for that specific Graviton instance type, or the AMI you need to use doesn't exist in that account? Why? Right? Something has happened. And yes, you can roll back relatively quickly from that mistake, but you just ruined your Friday. And we don't want that, right? So the goal is that we take infrastructure code, your CDK code, and treat it as, well, a code, right? You are treating CDK code as just regular code, right? Are you testing your CDK code? Are you doing all that? Well, you should. Testing is important, right? The code from, well, your infrastructure code, your CDK, your CloudFormation, Purumi, your Terraforms, whatever you're using should absolutely be treated as any other code. Okay, some of you may be wondering, who is this bald person and why is he yelling at the camera? let me introduce myself. My name is Darko Mesaroš. I'm a developer advocate at AWS. I have the chance to speak to a lot of community members, to talk to a lot of wonderful builders and engineers out there. And I've been doing this for, I've been doing AWS for the last 5 years, but I've been doing this yelling at the camera for the last year and a half. And I'm based in Berlin, but I'm originally from Serbia, hence the weird spellings of my name. So, but you can also follow me on all the things social media. So if you want more of this, yes, please do. I would be very happy. But let's get to the important things. Let's get to what about code testing. I mentioned testing is important. And when I say testing code, I don't mean testing things you provision. I mean testing the code. You know, we talk about test-driven development, right? Do you do that? Huh? Do you write your tests first before you write your code? Of course you do. We all do, right? But when it comes to test-driven development, ideally, when you build your infrastructure, first build your test. Write these small unit tests, and then use those unit tests to, write your code. So the goal of just a quick kind of a rundown, what is test-driven development? You write a test. You write a test that you expect something to exist, something to happen. Then what you do, you write the code to pass that test. The minimum amount of code that will pass that test. Yeah? We should do the same thing when it comes to CDK. So how do we do that with CDK? Let me talk about testing some CDK here. We all know CDK. It's a wonderful thing. I think, have you heard of CDK? It's this wonderful framework that uses the power of multiple programming languages. Oh, CDK Day? Yeah, okay. So because CDK is a generic programming language, we uses generic programming languages to provision your infrastructure, we can apply the best practices from some of these languages to provision your infrastructure, actually to test what you're provisioning. Wow. So we can use test frameworks for, JavaScript or maybe even Python. I'm not sure if Python exists yet, but I'm sure in this case, JavaScript and TypeScript, we can use the native Jest testing library to actually run some assertions, right? And what kind of tests can we run on the CDK? Well, you can do your run-of-the-mill snapshot tests, again, using Jest. You can use your fine-grained assertions, which is the thing we're going to be doing today. And you can run validation tests. And validation tests are just kind of the thing that comes with the programming language where you can actually validate data before it's being passed to something else. So with these tests, we can actually test, will our CDK do what we want before it does what we want? So let's see some testing in action. Now, with the magic of video editing, I've actually recorded a thing to show on screen. So I guess depending on the quality of the stream, you will be able to see things, but fingers crossed. Clicking on the next slide, let me actually show you how I run some testing on CDK. All right, let's create a simple CDK construct. Nothing special. I'm creating a dead letter queue because this was in the examples. Initializing this little thing, going through all of the stuff. Hey, I need to install all the packages, right? So making sure I'm running the latest version, I guess, things change in CDK too fast, so it's a version before. So this is now going through the entire thing. It's installing all the npm packages, and it should show up here, but apparently streaming things happening. So as you can see here now, you don't see, but at the bottom of the screen, we should be having npm install, and I'm installing the Jest framework right now, but I don't know why is this way. Okay, so we have installed all the things here, and I am going to go and show you now, I think, show you the the contents of this directory. I don't know why this is happening. So, well, this kind of sucks. But let's try to go through this. So this directory contains my typical CDK project, right? Nothing special. What I need to do here, I've installed Jest as a framework to test CDK, and I also need to configure Jest by configuring the package.json file. Just making sure that the test command is there, so I can run npm test, so it will run the command test command. It will execute Jest. As you can see, this is the version of Jest installed, and the only thing I need to do right now is I need to go ahead and I need to configure one thing about Jest, and that's setting the file extension it will look for, so it will only look for JavaScript files. So at the bottom here, I'm not sure if you're seeing this or not, but at the bottom of the stream, you should, well, I'm actually just adding a little thing to the JavaScript to the package.json file. Okay, that being done, we're good to do testing. So let's go and write our code. Well, actually, no. Let's go and write our test first because we're doing test-driven development. So let me actually write a simple test. I will write a test that I expect my CDK to do something, right? So as you can see here, things are happening. I'm going to delete this existing test that happens to be here, and I'm gonna create a new file, new blank test, nothing, which is gonna test a couple of things here. So using Vim here, and Matt and Satya and Mirabella, can you see the thing on the stream here, or is it just me? I just want to make sure that people can actually see these things on the stream.
So what I'm seeing on my side, let me get my pancakes hat back on. So what I'm seeing on my side is basically write that, and then
okay. So it's the same thing. All right, wait. Then let me try to do something else. I think there's an issue here with my device. So this is useless because you cannot see anything. So let me end the show like that, and let me open up something. Maybe we can do this. I can show you how it all looks because even though I have a recording, I also have a thing there. So, moving my laptop. Hey, okay, so let's have a look. Where is this thing? Do I see my cursor? I don't. Oh boy, this is not gonna be good. Give me just a second. I'm gonna stop, Matthew, I'm gonna stop my stream here for a second from the laptop, and I'm gonna try to connect it again. So stop the screen share and share it again. Screen this one. Well, actually, give me a second. I'm going to join from a different browser because why
not? Do not feel, particularly picked on here. It seems like we're all experiencing technical difficulties today. I'm going to blame the latest update to Big Sur.
I'm not blaming anything. I think it's fun. At least people know that this is not. It's not been pre-recorded. So, share the screen. Wait. Oh, Big Sur, thank you. Why are you complaining? Screen 2. Can I do this? Security and privacy. This thing. So there's a combination of things. It's Big Sur, and it's the new M1 Mac. So the
M1.
So let's blame it on those things. But I promise I will show you some code. So don't worry. I am not gone yet. So allow this and stop that and do this and share the screen and share the screen. Yes. Boom. Boom. Okay. I think something should show up. So let me actually try the videos again because that would make more sense. That thing. Okay, so hopefully what's going to happen now, you're going to see me write a test. Okay, so let's kick it off. And does that work? It was Firefox's fault. Okay, so I'm creating a simple test here. I'm creating a new test file. I'm going to remove the existing one because we don't need the existing one. And in this test, I'm going to define a couple of things. So I'm going to define a couple of things I expect of my CDK application to have, right? So creating new test with Vim, that's one. Let's give it a go. Important, the file name needs to have .test in it. So I'm just importing the basics. I'm importing the stack. I'm importing the assertion library. So the jest assertion library for CDK. And in this case, I need to import the actual stack that I'm going to be using, but it doesn't exist yet. So I'm just going to leave it commented out for the time being. Hopefully I don't forget to remove that. And I'm creating a test. I want to create a test that I want to ensure that my SQS queue creates a CloudWatch alarm. So I'm creating a new stack. I'm instantiating that stack, and the stack is going to be from the one I create later on. I'm instantiating it inside of this test. And now I set the expectations. My expectation is I want to have resources, actually to have a resource, a CloudWatch alarm. And that resource needs to be configured in this way, right? It needs to have the specific metric and namespace, and it needs to have these dimensions. So I have not written a single line of CDK code. Well, actually, the thing that makes the product infrastructure. I have just written my expectation right now. So that's how you do test-driven development. Relatively simple, nothing too complex here. But let's do another test. Let's add one more test to this one. So in the next test, I'm actually going to add not a specific resource like a CloudWatch alarm, but I want to make sure that when I configure my SQS queue, it is configured in a specific way. In this case, I want to make sure that just my retention period is 14 days. Super. Okay, again, instantiating the stack, all that stuff, and creating an expectation that my stack has a SQS queue with a message retention period set to this big number, which is 14 days in seconds. Perfect. So test written, it's time to write CDK. Let's write some CDK code. Create a new thing. I'm not going to dwell too much on writing CDK code. I'm just literally creating a simple dead letter queue construct. Actually, I'm extending the SQS construct, and that's it, right? So I'm extending the currently built-in SQS construct just so I can add some few things here for the sake of show. So I'm going to go through all of that. So hey, I need a CloudWatch alarm. Perfect. That's one of my tests. I need to pass that test by adding the alarm, and then adding the appropriate things like your metrics and your evaluation periods and all that stuff within that alarm. Perfect. We are good now. We have written our code after we have written our test. Now, let's see, is our code good by actually running that test? So what I'm going to do right now, and this is not sped up, I'm actually going to run npm run build, right? I'm going to compile my TypeScript, and I'm going to run npm test. And npm test should invoke jest after I fix my code. You remember the thing I told you I'm not going to forget? Yeah, I forgot to fix my test. So npm run build will fail if your test doesn't work. So if your test has not been written correctly. So I just need to make sure to import the stack file and also to give the proper construct name when I instantiate it. So in this case, it's the dead letter Q1. So, test CDK-Dia Q. So just copy that, put it in the right place, and we are good to go. Save that, Darko. Fix it. Yes, bravo. While Darko fixes that, I'll have a drink of tea. npm run build, and good. Now, npm run test. Let's see if this works. Give it a go. We see it's executing jest. Perfect. Running test. Boom. Failed. I forgot to add something intentionally, of course. So, but you can see here, it expects to have an SQS queue. It does have an SQS queue, but it doesn't have a message retention period of 14 days. So that test has actually failed. How do I add this? I have to go back to the file and actually just add that little thing here, there. So I need to change my construct to include the message retention period there. I'm going to do that by just adding some properties here to go over that. Why is all of this important? I've actually made sure that even before I deploy anything into a production environment, I want to test against it. I want to make sure that it actually happens, not by looking at it and see, oh, this works or not, but this way it helps me, do proper test-driven development and actually define things before creating them. So it's just a safer way to do things instead of potentially breaking things out there. And an npm tests are going to run, and boom, we are good. Excellent. Now, we also need to make sure it's there. What does that mean? So when I actually go through all the tests and it's all fine and they all pass, I need to deploy this somewhere, right? And I need to make sure that it has deployed in the way I want it. Because sometimes things may slip and I may forget to add a property or set it differently, and it's not exactly the way I want it. I may have forgotten it in a test. How can I make sure that that thing, the resource, the infrastructure, has actually deployed in the way I want it? I can actually, try to go over my code again and see, yeah, is this good? It's not the best thing in the world. I can go to CloudFormation. I can have a look. Oh, all of my resources are actually deployed there, and it's I can configure. Oh yeah, my resource is fine. Is all that. We don't do this way, right? It's too slow. It's not automatic. We need to find an engineer approach to this. So how can we automate verifying, dare I say auditing, things that we deploy? There's this amazing open source tool called Inspec. Inspec from the lovely folks at Chef. Inspec is actually a tool that just does a lot of, well, inspections. It audits things. It makes sure something is in the way you want it to be. And you can actually use Chef Inspec with CDK, well, actually with AWS. It's not CDK specific. So one of the things I like to do is have an inspect test somewhere down the line to actually have a look. Is the thing I've deployed, is it actually deployed the way I want it to? So I have a demo. I think I have enough time. And this demo is not recorded. So I'm going to actually just show you in here just quickly to see, so you can see how Inspec looks and how does it actually interact with CDK and AWS itself. So switching over to a thing, so like that, and I think I can do this. Go there, boom. Yes, okay, so you are seeing now my Cloud9 environment. Here I have a relatively simple stack. The stack includes just a bunch of ECS Fargate clusters and CloudFront distribution on S3 bucket. I want to make sure that because I'm launching this this ECS cluster automatically, I want to make sure that these security groups are not open to the world. And I'm not defining the security groups anywhere in the stack intentionally. I'm just using the built-in things, but sometimes we don't know what CDK does. But I want to make sure that CDK actually does that. Also, I want to make sure that the S3 bucket being created here is not open to the world. I'm hiding it behind the how's it called, the origin access identity on CloudFront. I want to make sure that it's not being open to the world. So what I can actually do here is I can create an inspec file here that basically just defines, hey, use inspec AWS to test my things, or use controls to check out, is the thing that I've actually deployed, is it the way I want it? Because a lot of times we deploy things and we don't even notice they're bad until somebody calls us on the phone, and you don't want that. So how do these controls look like? Let's have a look. This is a control that ensures that my S3 bucket is not open. So it basically describes an AWS S3 bucket. I give it the bucket name of the bucket that's actually being created. And I just make sure that it exists, that it actually creates a bucket, and that it's not public. Okay, good. Let's find the second one. Security groups. Okay, so I actually pass it a bunch of multiple security groups, in this case just 2, but I pass it multiple security groups, and it goes through each security group and just make sure that only allows port 80. And that's it, right? So it goes through these things. I can also define different things like explicitly deny specific ports, etc. But with these 2 rules, and also with, let me find it here, with a YAML file containing all of those things. Now, unfortunately, there's no neat way to kind of integrate CDK or CloudFormation directly with this. You need to find a way to generate your inputs file, and you can do that with a bunch of scripting, and that's what people usually do. You use your CDK outputs file, you get this big old JSON object, you get this whatever. You get this JSON object, and you need to parse it and make the thing suitable for inspec. But once you do, you get this lovely inputs file, and then against that inputs file, I run a command. And let me actually clear this up and run the command. So inspec exec and the path to the input file. So what this is going to do now is it's going to run inspec against all of those resources. And as you can see here, the bucket is expected to exist. It exists. It's not public. Excellent. And then the second test, security group exists, and it's allowing port 80. So this is a really neat way to kind of define a bunch of different tests, a bunch of different control points of saying, hey, this is how you can confirm that things you have deployed ultimately are the things you want, because testing never stops. All right, let me go back. See, we can do it live. Okay. If you are looking for some inspec code, my colleague Jenna has actually written a lot of examples when it comes to inspec and Terraform and CloudFormation, and it kind of all applies to the same thing. So if you want to see a couple of great examples from Jenna, check out this her GitHub repo. She was a lot of inspiration for me to do this thing. So make sure to go there and check it out. And finally, let's slowly wrap this up. Just one thing to note here. all the stuff I talked about today, all the unit tests, all the inspect stuff, none of this should run on your laptop. Well, at least not in the long run. All of this should exist in a pipeline. You should be running this in a CI/CD pipeline and doing all of those stuff there. So make sure to do that. And just a couple of things you need to remember. My closing points, my final thoughts. Infrastructure code is code like any other code, right? Treat it in the same way. Put it in a repo, test against it, put it through a pipeline. Don't do CDK deploy from your workstation, even though we do it. Write tests before you do something like that. Testing is actually never done. So even once you deploy your things to production, create inspect control points and keep on testing against provision infrastructure just to make sure nothing has changed, because drift can happen. So using testing while in production is also key. And it's much cheaper to have broken code early. So if you can catch CDK issues inside of your text editor, inside of your whatever workstation, laptop, whatnot, the sooner you catch it, the cheaper it is. the most expensive problem code is the one that enters production and you get people, well, ruining your Friday. With that being said, first of all, Jonathan, thank you very much for interpreting me. Thank you very much to everybody here bearing with the problems with the video. And thank you. My name has been Darko Mesaroš. Matthew, can you share the link to this feedback form? I will ask you for feedback. Yes, that thing. I will ask you for feedback because we live on feedback. So thank you very much. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out to me on the social medias. I am open up to all the messages and wherever you can find me. I'm also on the CDK Dev Slack group. I am omnipresent. I think you can send a carrier pigeon to me. So thank you very much once again. And yeah.
All right. Let's. Yeah, that's good. I'll cover up my face with the box.
I'm happy to go now.
Thanks, man. Darko, fantastic talk. I've used CDK before. I've used inspect before, and I think this is the first time I'm seeing CDK plus inspect being used in combination along with Jest.
Yeah. I've been using it in my chef days. And when I was doing a lot of chef, I was doing a lot of inspect as well. And inspect is just a great all-around tool. And I found a really great way to kind of work it in with CDK. Well, it's a bit cheating. It's not directly with CDK, but it makes sense.
I figured that there had to be a chef connection because only people who reuse chef would know about inspect, because I use inspect for unit testing my cookbooks and funny enough, for my Packer builds as well. So, I should ensure this version is there and whatnot. Matthew, do we have any time for Q&A? Are we?
Let's see here. Where are we going? We are actually right about on time. So if we do have a question or two, I think we can answer it. But if not, we will go right on into Elad's talk.
I think let's head on to Elad.
Let's head on to the second one.
I agree.
You can ask me questions on everywhere else, so feel free to ping me wherever you find me.
Agreed. So let's get Elad in here. Elad, welcome back.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for creating this amazing day. It's been moving to see to hear all the talks. I've been trying to switch tracks and hear things in fast forward so I could catch up. But I'm gonna make sure to catch up all of the talks later.
Excellent. Now, do you have a screen that you're going to be sharing during this?
Oh yeah. I forgot to do that. Let me see. Yep.
All right. And again, while we wait for a moment, I want to give a big shout out to all of our interpreters today. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. We really love you guys. This has added, I think, a lot to our CDK Day, and we couldn't obviously have done this without you. So thank you again for being here. So without any further ado, let's get Elad's screen up here, and it is all yours.
Cool. So we're gonna do two parts for this talk. You guys asked that I'd spend some time talking a little bit about where we are with the CDK, and so the first thing. So that's going to be the second part of the talk. First thing, I wanted to do something a little play a little bit with Projen, And it's not going to be a talk about Projen. I don't even know what Projen is still. I'm still discovering a little bit. Every time there's some new use cases and some new crazy usage for it. And in a sense, I'm more and more realizing that Projen is kind of like the CDK for everything. Or in a sense, it's kind of like a basic foundation for CDKs. Because in today's software as infrastructure as code world and GitOps world, everything is source code. Everything is in your repository. And so in a sense, Projen is a CDK for generating files that go into your repository. And it has some nice, very simple but useful tools for generating and synthesizing files into your repository. And so I wanted to like stretch that a little bit and see what we can do with generating, this a very specific type of file, which is the source code that's in your repository. Projen has been really good at like generating all these config files and workflows and things like that. And none of those are source, but source is also files in your repo. And so I wanted to like see what I can do with that and maybe just inspire some people to like build very cool things with this. I don't know. We'll see. Don't try this at home without really understanding what the use case is. And so it's more like a game than something very concrete. And then it was very funny to like hear this conversation about like how do you pronounce Projen, and to be honest, I'm not a native English speaker, and so I really didn't have that distinction between Projen and Projen. So it's very funny. It's very fun to like think about it, and I don't even know what gen is for. Is it for generator or? But yeah, I guess like the most fun names are the ones that make us talk about them. So in that sense, it's a good name. Okay, let's just code. And again, as soon as I finish this, I'm going to jump over to another presentation and talk a little bit about where we are with the CDK, what are we up to, what are we thinking about for the future. And if we'll have some time at the end, I'm happy to take more questions if there are any. Okay, so I actually did something that I shouldn't have done and literally released a new version for Projen 5 minutes ago, which is probably the worst idea ever in demo land. But I think it gives people a little bit of a sense of like how experimental Projen is. And again, I know that people are using it for real world things, and I've seen a few amazing talks about it, and we're talking with the community a lot about it. But it is important for me to mention that Projen is still in very early stage, and it's changing very rapidly. I'm trying as much as possible. We're trying as much as possible not to break things like dramatically between releases, but we're releasing every commit. Which means that there could be some mishaps, and we're trying to like revert them and things like that. And I'm hoping that this release 5 minutes ago would not have been a mishap. What I did is basically add support for CDK v2, because we have just announced CDK v2 developer preview, and I was thinking, well, we should probably have support for Projen in v2. But if it doesn't work, I can just like I'll figure it out. So I'll just create a directory and basically go on and start by creating an AWS, CDK TypeScript up. No post means that it won't run yarn after it creates Projen. I like to do that because then I can open my ID. And then I can also do something like this and specify the RC1 CDK version v2. And so hopefully that's going to work. I'm going to kick off my IDE, and in the meantime, I'm going to install yarn here. And what's going on here? Unable to resolve. Let's do this once more. Oh yeah, it needed to install all the stuff. Yeah, my shortcuts are always biting me in the Okay, but in the meantime, I can still open my project and just see how it looks like. The main difference between V1 and V2, if you will actually take your V1 project and change it to a 2.0 version, is that there's a single dependency for the CDK, which is the AWS CDK lib dependency, so this one. And then you also need constructs at 10 and above. And the reason we named it 10 is because constructs are not going to get any major versions from now on. I mean, famous last words, I guess, but hopefully constructs are not going to get any major versions anymore. So all changes are going to be backwards compatible. And that is really important for this interoperability thing that we talked about earlier. Okay, so this is my Projen project. It's just a CDK application. It doesn't have anything unique about it. But then I wanted to show you this new feature we have in Projen called Watch. And it's what you would expect. It basically just like watches your project and resynthesizes your project files as you change your Projen file. And it's pretty cute because you can like literally see what Projen is doing for your project. So you can do something like, oh, let's edit this description. And then immediately it synthesizes your changes, or you can change your, oh, this is bad. This is probably gonna, anyway, it automatically synthesizes any changes, and you can see that happening. And so if I, for example, if I like remove Mergify from my project, then you can see that my Mergify file was erased, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a nice way to interactively use Projen, which is not, might be good for like developing Projen stuff, but it's really nice for what I'm gonna show you right now. And so let's talk about some use case for code generation. And that use case, the use case that I want to talk about is I want to create a model, like a data model, and then also put this data in a DynamoDB and interact with this data from like a Lambda function. So it's a pretty common use case. I think Eric's talk even had something very similar to that. And so I wanted to show how code generation can reduce the amount of boilerplate required in order to do something that's very common, that you do a lot. And so a data model, you would normally start from a schema, right? Like some kind of an interface. And so for example, let's say I want to create a data model for a user. It would look something like this, right? Name, last name, and then I guess username would be like my key, right? So this is a simple model for user, and so I can write that by hand, but and that's okay. It's actually a really concise definition, and it gives me a lot of power. But maybe it actually gives me a little bit too much power, because data models, especially ones that are going to store into something like DynamoDB, have constraints, and so like the surface area that TypeScript gives me here might be a little too large. And so instead of doing that by hand, let's try to do it using Projen. And so Projen has this new component called source code. And what it does is basically generates a text file in your project. So I can do something like this, for example. Let me delete this file so it's not gonna yell at me. And as soon as I save this, I can see that I have a new file called user. Let's open it up here. And then I can do something like, the API for source code is very low level, right? It's basically kind of like the L0 for source code. And so I can like emit lines, hello. And I can also open and close blocks. So it'll basically maintain some indentation across blocks, which is a very common thing to do with source code. And so the first thing that I want to emit here is actually what we call the Projen marker. File-based Projen marker. And that's this little string that Projen is using to identify Projen files that are no longer maintained by Projen. Because when I change this file name, for example, I need Projen to erase the old file and create a new file. And so the only way for Projen to identify things that are not modeled in the application is by is through a reductive way, right? They say, oh, just remove all the files in this directory that have not been generated by Projen, and you'll see those markers everywhere in the Projen world. And so, but since source code is a general purpose source code thing, we couldn't add like this marker automatically. So let's create one for TypeScript. So I'll just use a function, TypeScript TS file, and then path would be something like that. I'm just keeping it really concise. And then this would be src, and then the path here would be, just path, and return src. And now I can just create a TypeScript file by doing src user.ts and src whatever project. And you see that those files are now created. Okay, so I've got my basic building block for creating files. Now, let's create a function that's called entity. And an entity is in our data model. An entity would have like a name, and then the key, the name of the field that represents the key or the primary key in DynamoDB, and then a bunch of fields. And then from that entity, I can do something like entity username, and then in our example, it was like name and last name and whatever, phone number. And let's say all of them are strings, right? Keep it super simple. And so now, okay, so I created this entity. You see this user thing was deleted because I didn't create the file yet. Okay, so I'm going to start generating a file. So now I need to do TypeScript, src, let's call it base name dash model, or maybe even base name slash model. That would be nice. So this will be the model. And so let's close this one. And now I have a directory called user with a model file. Okay, so now let's start generating this, this interface. So export interface name. And you see, this is how I use this open and close thing. And I know that it's not as, could be nicer, but I guess with like some lambda or something. But now I need a closing thing here. And the nice thing about this interactive watch is that I can literally use my IDE I get like IDE completion used in the code generation. I get like errors and things like that. Okay, so I need the key here as a field, and I need what else do I need? I need for each field to emit an entry, field string, something like that. Cool. And I can even do this, right? Amazing. And you see the power of this obviously already, but I can easily add another field here, and it is just gonna go here. And if I want to standardize some things like naming or comments and default values or whatever, right? Like if I want to standardize any of those things, I can really do it in a central way, because again, it goes back to this whole philosophy about the CDK being a meta programming paradigm, where you can basically write code in order to synthesize something, or synthesize configuration templates, synthesize files, synthesize configuration. And by being able to write code, you can think about things at a higher order, or at a higher level. Okay, so I've got my user. I made all those optional because the only thing that's required is the username, and then the rest is just as an opinion. Okay, so now let's talk about the Dynamo table. Okay, here's my CDK application. I'm going to want to do something like new Dynamo table, but for the user. And so I'm going to generate another file next to the model file, which will represent my table, my construct. And that's going to look like TS src base name table, I guess. Cool. Let's put it here. And then this file will be basically a construct. So it's going to be open export class name table extends DynamoDB table. and close. And then I will need to import the DynamoDB module, and I'm going to do that since I'm using CDK v2. It's going to look like import as DynamoDB from AWS CDK lib / AWS DynamoDB. And you'll see we actually intentionally organized v2 so that the only difference basically from an import perspective in TypeScript, and in other languages it's not very different, is this, right? Like this is v1 and this is v2. So technically, migrating your code from v1 to v2 should require to do that. I think that there's also going to be some tooling that does that automatically for you. I don't know if it's going to be available for all the languages, but okay. So now I'm going to need a constructor, scope, ID, and and then table line, super scope ID, and then here I need the props. They're going to be open, I guess, and table close. And this is, using a very low-level source code construct, or a very low-level source code class. You could imagine a whole high-level API for generating source code in different languages, or even multiple languages, where we can model the abstract syntax tree as constructs, as classes, and basically use them together to generate source code. So I'm using a very low-level thing just to make that demo really easy and approachable, and also because I don't have these high-level libraries yet, but I think people can get the idea. Okay, so what's here? Oh, the order, of course. And so you see this interactive thing. I'm really excited by this interactive thing, because I feel like one of the challenges with code generation sometimes is that you really lose all the power of your IDE, and by having that interactive feedback, you can literally just use your IDE to say, oh, I need the partition key here. Okay, partition key. And then the name of it I know is ID, and the type is going to be DynamoDB dot attribute type dot string. And then let's see what's happening here. Some error. Oh, ID. No, it was key, and that has to be string actually. Okay, cool. And now I need a comma here. So this looks like, obviously there could be a lot of stuff, other stuff in it, but this is basically the basis of the user table. I just need a table with a partition key based on the same in the same key. And so now I can use this thing, right? It's code in my project, which is pretty nice. I can just do user table here, import it, and then do new user table, this user table, and that's it. And I guess if I synthesize my CDK application, we should be able to see the table with the key and with everything that's neat. Okay, so far it's pretty nice. I have my model, and I have a Dynamo table, but now I want to interact with my my Dynamo table through a Lambda function. So let's bring in the notoriously amazing Node.js Lambda module, and create a Lambda function, Node.js function, this, whatever, create user. And the entry point will be, oh, sorry, what did I do wrong? Node.js function, check. Oh, it's lowercase. Node.js function, and then the entry point would be create user TS. And then I'm going to create my little thing here, create user TS, async function handler event. And actually, the event, I can use my model, right? Let's say the event that I'm expecting my Lambda function to accept is the user model. And here is where I'm going to need to write some AWS SDK code to put item into my DynamoDB. And you've all done that a million times. You'd need to instantiate the AWS SDK's DynamoDB client, and then put an item, and then you need to somehow transfer the table name from my construction code to my runtime code. And obviously, all of that is going to be loosely typed, right? Because the name of the key is something that I don't know here. And so to that end, we're going to synthesize another file we'll call a client. And so I'm going to get back to my Projen file, and that's going to be the client file. And the client file is going to look like this. And that's going to actually be a little bit tedious, but that's where actually a lot of the value is. Okay, so I've started this. I'm going to put that here so I can like see what I'm doing. And then open export class name client. And then I'm going to need, sorry, this should be closed. I'm going to need the AWS. Okay, basically I'm going to need to do something like public async put item, and then item column name. So that's going to be basically the API that I want here. Why did I do this? Not sure. Okay, and in order to implement this API, I need the AWS SDK. So I'm going to import it here. And obviously, it's not installed in my project. Oh, it is installed. No, it's not installed in my project, I think. Right? Yeah, it's not part of my project dependencies. So I can literally do that here, which is I think pretty interesting to like think about the power of being able to like create a self-contained component, right? This component called entity is something that I can publish to a package manager. And the user who uses that component doesn't need to know that they need to install some dependency. You know, it could be the SDK, could be any other dependency. As far as they're concerned, they're just using this entity thing, and it'll go in and install this thing into their project. So it's a very powerful notion. You know, this ability to basically reach out to different parts of your code base or your repo and basically do whatever it needs to be done, because those things are always coupled together. They're not disconnected. This disconnect that sometimes we see is mostly from a mechanical reason. It's kind of like the disconnect between runtime code and infrastructure code that was originating from the fact that we use JSON files or YAML files to define our infrastructure. So we felt that there's this humongous barrier between those two things, but there wasn't really. You know, like once we put everything in code, suddenly we saw that these things are really very strongly coupled, and there's a lot of power in expressing that coupling using programming languages. Anyway, enough ranting. Okay, so I now need to. I'm just going to do it backwards. So it's going to be return. Okay, I need the client. So let's add the client. Line read only client equals new AWS. I actually can bring in the DynamoDB here directly because I don't need anything else. I can do this. Cool. And now I can do this .client .put item request .prompts. I always like to put the request outside so I can like so it's easier to work with. Oh, and I also need to import the model file name from model. Nice, because it's local. I know the name is model, and obviously the order is wrong. Okay, so now let's try and do that quickly because that's going to take a little bit. Okay, so request is of type. What is the type? Put item input. DynamoDB put item input equals open. Heavy on the programming today. I hope people have managed to like stay up and keep up. Okay, so now let's see what I need. I need table name and item. So table name is something that I would actually need to bring in from like some environment variable. So let's give this environment variable a name. Call it env. And it's going to be basically name to to uppercase table, table name. I'll just put it here. And then here I can do line table name process env. And since it could technically be null, I need to do this. Okay, cool. So I've got table name, and now I need the item. So the item would be item attributes. I'm going to fill them out previously. Okay, so I'm slowly doing that. That's how I would program it, for, like myself, without any code generation or anything like that. I'm always going to go from the bottom. Okay, so now I'm going to need something like const attributes, and this is, I think, of put item attribute map. So this is basically kind of like a placeholder. And then the first thing I'm going to need to do is attributes dot name. That's the primary key, which has to exist. Is going to be item dot name, right? And then for all the other fields, I need to actually make sure. Oh, not name, key. And then for all of the other things, I actually need to check if they're not null, because they could be null. So I'm going to do for const field of fields, client open, if item key is not null, then attributes key equals s item key. Boom. Why key? Field. Nice. And so this is all of this is basically boilerplate that I should have written in my Lambda function, because that's how I need to write this. There's no other way. And so last thing I want to do is basically use this in my Lambda function, which you may expect, is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to import my user client from here, and I'm going to have some Hebrew letters, and then user client, and then async await dot put item, and then this actually accepts a user thing. So I'm just going to pass it event, and that's it. The last remaining piece is to bind this environment variable to my Lambda function. And so I'm just going to do it real fast because I'm really running out of time. And what I want to do is the way I'm going to do it is not, I'm not sure that's the most elegant way, but the way I'm going to do it is going to add another method here that says bind. And then it'll accept a handler of type Lambda function. Sorry, function. And then, and I'm going to need to import Lambda here as well. And then what it'll do is basically do handler add environment env this dot table name. So it's basically binding, but it's all behind the scenes. And so the beauty of this is that the user, all they need to do, and it could also do something like table. It also can do something like this table grant read write to handler, unless if that makes sense from a policy perspective. Not this table, just this. Read write data. Of course. Okay, and so now in my main function, I would basically need to do something like handler and then users, and then I'm going to be users.bind handler. And that's it. I guess the last thing to maybe do, I don't know if that's even important, because I think the message, the point that I wanted to get through is this experience eventually, right? Like now I want to add another entity. I want to do something like, oh, let's add an entity called a project, and then I can do ID, project ID as the thing, and then the name, description. And I can just do it like this. I've added this project thing, and now I have this like model. I have a client library for it. I have a project for a construct for it. And so if I look at the CDK out directory, let's just do that real quick. I can see that's not, is that the one? My stack dev? That sounds like a wrong name. Maybe that's the name. Anyway, I've got the right policy here for read and write. I've got my Lambda function with the environment variable bound to the thing. I've got my table with the primary key. And I've got my bundled Node.js function that includes the client library and my code. And it doesn't include the SDK because the Lambda Node.js module actually knows to not include it because it's already installed on Lambda. That's it, I guess, for this part. Let me say hi. By the way, Jonathan, thank you so much for interpreting. I love that you guys are all doing this this time. Okay, so we've got a few more minutes. I'm gonna not take too long, but I wanted to share a little bit about where we are with the CDK, what's up, and hopefully we'll have a bit of time later for Q&A if that's going to be of interest. Let me open that slide deck first, and then I'm going to share my screen again. I hope that the Projen thing was interesting. I'm curious to hear what people think. And then, you know, building higher level things with it is going to be the fun part, I guess. Let me share my screen. Oof. This is very, okay. So CDK, what's up? Why should we talk about CDK, what's up? I guess it's pretty obvious, but I did want to say that still at Amazon, we sometimes think about the CDK as open source first. And it's one of the bigger open source projects we have at Amazon. And so we're really trying to like push I wouldn't even say push the boundaries, do it right. And in my mind, doing it right means that it's not just about the code, it's also about the processes that we do. It's the design processes, it's the planning processes, and this is and most of all, it's the decision making. And so the most important part for us is we want your feedback on this. It's not like this is what we're gonna do and wait for it. It's more about here's what we're planning to do. Let us know if that makes sense. Let us know if we forgot something huge. Let us know if we're going in the wrong direction. Let us know if your use cases are neglected or completely ignored. Obviously, we can't do everything. It's a big project and there's more and more surface area to cover. But we are trying to prioritize. It's really hard. We're trying to make it conscious decisions about what to invest in, and your feedback is the most important part. We really do listen. We really do use all the signals that we can get from the community to make those decisions. And so please reach out. Just reach out directly to me on Slack, on Twitter, on GitHub, or to any one of the team members. We're pretty approachable and pretty accessible. And also, we're sharing what we're doing. We're sharing what we're planning, but also we all know that software is really hard, and it's very common that things don't work out the way you thought they would, and so the plans would change. And some of the things that I'm going to talk about here are not going to happen. Maybe other things are going to happen. So accept the fact that this is not our commitment to deliver a specific thing at a specific time. It's more about sharing and being visible. And so I'm just going to dive into some of the projects that we've been working on, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing and we're planning for the future. And so the first thing we released this year was CDK for Go. We launched a developer preview a few weeks ago, I think the beginning of the month. It took quite a long time to build the Go bindings. It's a JSI language. I'm not going to go exactly what JSI is. If you're interested, check that out. But it's basically a language that's supported in all the CDK ecosystem. And so the fact that it's now available for AWS CDK means that we're able to release, for example, CDK for Kubernetes in Go, which is coming soon. We're going to do that pretty soon, because this is, I think, the #1 request for CDK for Kubernetes. Makes sense, I guess, in the Kubernetes community. It also means that you can publish your construct libraries in Go already. And so I'm really keen to see people starting to add publishing of Go libraries to their construct libraries. And Projen supports Go publishing, so you should be able to do that today. Again, the most interesting part, this is developer preview. We really want to know if we did the right thing. And Go is unique. If you're familiar with it, it's not a standard object-oriented language. And so mapping all the idioms and type system from JSII to Go required a lot of opinion. And so we want to know if those opinions made sense and if the Go experience feels right to native Go developers. So let us know. Second thing, we already talked about it today. I know it came up a few times, is V2. And so as I said, we managed to release the developer preview of V2 today, and the team worked really hard on this. We've been working on V2 for over 6 months, to be honest. And it's weird, because if you look at what is V2, it's not a lot. It's mainly just this packaging change, this experimental API removal. But it required us to really be very intentional about what we're putting in there, how we do that without breaking V1, by continuously releasing V1, because we're not going to stop releasing V1. And so it's important to know that most of your code should work without any change, or with only the import line changes. Of course, let us know if that's not the case. It's also important to note that every new feature that we're going to release until we announce differently is going to be released both on the V1 branch and the V2 branch. Our main development is still going to be continue to be on the V1 branch. So if you're contributing code, if you're submitting PR, you can continue to do that over the V1 branch. It'll automatically propagate to V2. Epsilon merge conflicts, which we all love and cherish. The third project I want to talk to you about, and I don't know, I don't think we've talked about that publicly yet, but this is something we're kicking off now, and I'm excited about. And we've been trying to come up with some way to do that earlier, and sadly we couldn't. But finally, we're starting to build what we now call the Construct Hub. Maybe that's going to be the final name, or maybe not. But it's what you would expect it to be, basically. Nothing more, at least initially. It's going to have a search experience and a discovery experience. And then it's going to have a package page, which shows you the package information. You're going to be able to switch which language you want to use between the languages that the package supports. And the entire experience is going to switch up for you, including the sample code, including the reference documentation, thanks to the magic of JSII. You're going to be able to jump over to the package managers and see the installation instructions for each package, and even have links. Hopefully that'll work well, but even have cross references between module. And so if your module references some type from another module, hopefully you're going to be able to even jump over between those two. And the other important thing about Construct Hub is that we're actually going to release it as a construct, the entire Construct Hub, under CDK Labs Construct Hub. And that's already a public repository. You're not going to see anything there because we've just started, literally just starting. But the idea is that you're going to be able to deploy Construct Hub internally for your team or your enterprise. And we're going to also do that internally at Amazon. And so we're hopefully going to dog food this and make sure that it's actually working. But again, we see a lot of requests for people to be able to share these constructs. We see what Liberty Mutual has done in this space, which is incredible. And so we hope to make that more accessible and available to people. We're also looking into something like having the community be part of the development. And so if you're interested in that, just join this channel on CDK Dev, and we're gonna provide some more information in the coming weeks about participation if you're interested. The next project I want to talk about is CDK pipelines, which I hope that some of you are using. It's been quite a long time in developer preview for good reasons. We've been listening and we've been trying to understand what's the right thing to do with it. We're converging towards the GA, so I hope that that's going to be our next launch. One of the bigger things we're going to do, and that's probably includes some breaking changes, is to decouple the API of code pipeline, API of CDK pipeline from the API of code pipeline. If you are familiar with CDK pipelines, you know that there's some leaks from the code pipeline API up to the CDK pipeline API, and that these leaks make it really hard for us to enable future developments, like being able to use CDK pipelines with different backends. So for example, as a simple use case that many of our customers are looking for is to be able to synthesize GitHub workflows from CDK pipelines, or use Jenkins, or use Circle CI, but still use the CDK pipelines high-level capabilities of orchestrating application deployments. And so that's one of the bigger things that we're working on, and there are other things that we decided are critical before we GA. But as I said, we're converging, and hopefully that's not going to be too long. Other stuff we've been doing, and there's tons more. I just thought to highlight a few things. CDK for Kubernetes was accepted at the beginning of the year to the CNCF Foundation, to the Linux Foundation, as a sandbox project, which is extremely exciting for us. It's the first Amazon project to get accepted to that foundation, and the implications, the long-term implications, is that we are on a path to turn CDK for Kubernetes to a community-governed project, which means that decisions on what to do with the project will eventually happen in an open governance model. And as I said, it's the first time AWS is doing it, Amazon's doing it, so we're like treading slowly and carefully and making sure that we're doing it right. And if you feel we don't, then please let us know. But I'm very excited about this because I feel like this is a genuine contribution to the Kubernetes community, and I think it can benefit many teams, whether they use AWS or not. If you're not aware, we had this really cute Twitch stream show called CDK Construction Zone. It was like every 2 weeks on Tuesday. Season 1 finale is in 2 weeks. We actually couldn't do it next week, so it's going to be in 2 weeks. Stay tuned. We're going to just like bring in some of the CDK core members and have fun. And we're going to do another season because this was really awesome and really fun. And whether you watched it or not, we just had tons of fun doing it. The other thing is that we kind of started to organize all our CDK projects into a single GitHub org. Hopefully that's going to make it easier for people to track what we're doing and discover new things. And the last thing is that we started doing this big survey to learn about CDK usage. There's a GitHub issue here with a link inside to the survey. We would love anyone who's interested to contribute and let us know what they think. One of the primary things we're trying to focus on is how can we improve the documentation, because we know the documentation has problems, and so we want to understand what would help. We're not sure. We're really not sure. Okay, last one is directions for 21, 22. Again, projects that we're thinking about, ideas. Some of them are more concrete than others. First one is CDK testing. There was a really good talk about CDK testing today, and we know that that's one of the primary benefits of using, the CDK for defining our infrastructure. And we want to give a comprehensive experience for all the languages to support unit testing and integration testing and component testing and pipeline testing. Obviously, that's going to be an incremental process. But we really are interested to make sure that there's a really awesome experience for testing the CDK stuff. The other thing that we're looking into is we acknowledge the problem of iteration speed. We all know that redeploying your stack every time you make a little change in your Lambda function is not the ideal way to do it. And so we're looking at shortcuts and some creative ideas on how to improve that iteration cycle, because we know that that's our bread and butter as developers. We are aware of some things that make it harder for enterprises to adopt CDK, especially in enterprises where there's a stricter role division between infrastructure or networking people and security people and app developers and cloud center of excellence people, and rolling up multiple hundreds of accounts and things like that using stack sets or control tower. And so there's a theme around making the CDK more accessible to the mainstream enterprise crowd. And again, make sure to let us know if one of your use cases is not being filled. We're looking into kind of launching this program called CDK Contributors Program, which is a direction to be more intentional about working with contributors. We have incredible contributors, which we just love and cherish and salute every day, but we feel that we've been very reactive about it, instead of saying, hey, here are things that we need help with. And we think that by being more proactive, we're going to be able to accelerate the CDK development and do more of the right things, as opposed to just random things that people come and decide that they want to contribute. And also, celebrate contributors, make sure that they're acknowledged, make sure that people are aware that they're part of this community. I talked about documentation improvements, the ecosystem of construct libraries, hand in hand in releasing Construct Hub. We want to make sure that the ecosystem is growing in the right way, and that there's cool and healthy projects in that ecosystem. So basically creating a program to help construct library authors and make it easier for them to publish their libraries and make them predictable. And other things are thinking about constructs a little bit more, maybe as more of a programming primitive and not just as a base class, if you will, because we are seeing this general purpose use of it. And so we're looking into something in the more of the research experimentation level here. And as I said previously, we're maybe looking at productizing Projen. Again, it depends on whether we're able to get some funding, but we're still obviously maintaining it and trying to do whatever we can with the current investment. Okay, next steps, I guess, just call for action is, I wrote this really big because I think that, this is something that we're trying to improve as a community. We need your signal to make decisions more and more as the project grows and evolves. Without that signal, we're flying blind. And so +1 everything you care about. Go to the RFC's repo, go to the CDK repo. When you search for things, make sure that we know that you need something, and then that will really help us make decisions. Try out CDK for Go. Take CDK survey for a spin. Join Construct Hub Dev and CDK Dev if you're interested to collaborate with us on Construct Hub. And last but not least, just continue to be awesome, and please don't hesitate to tell us what you think. I know that you don't, which is incredible, but I'm really, really, really thank you for being this amazing community. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Elad. We really appreciate it, giving us a good key on that, and we'll make sure links and everything are spread around. We have Eric, our Sam Squirrel. He's joined us back again from track 1.
Right.
Welcome back.
Yeah, wouldn't be a CDK day without Sam the Squirrel in it. So,
Well, now Pancakes and Sam are playing better than ever.
That's right.
So, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. If anybody wants to close or say anything, and now is the time.
Someone just asked where they can get this costume. They can have mine. So
No,
there you go. There's the answer.
You don't want his. That thing smells so bad.
Oh, okay, yeah. We're getting off topic here.
A big round of thanks to our speakers and also to the interpreters on both tracks. They have been doing a phenomenal job. And for us as people who are running the hosts, we have to show our face for like 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes, and then we can just hide behind. You can relax. Unfortunately, for the interpreters, they're like so actively going about it. It's not really easy. So big round of thanks to everyone, and of course Matt as well for running things behind the scenes for the official video producer of the series.
Indeed. All right, everybody. Mirabella, anything?
Same as Satya. Thank you, everyone. I was actually following the Twitter as well, and there's a lot of people that are tweeting about the interpreters as well. They're saying that it's such a good addition to this year. So many thanks, Hillary, Jonathan. Thank you to EJ as well. We know we haven't really seen you on this track, but welcome. Welcome to our track as well.
Nice. It's nice here. It's nice here.
Yeah. Thanks to Matt, Elad. We don't have the other Matt on this track either, but many thanks to the other Matt, and thanks to the rest of the team as well. It's nice to see this actually happening. And obviously thanks for the chat.
Agreed.
Amazing work.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good night, whatever it is for you. And we will see you at the next CDK Day.
Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.